Here is the translation of the provided Vietnamese transcript, maintaining emotional depth, changing names where necessary, and removing irrelevant broadcast elements. I am Morgan H., and once again we meet in this quiet space of the late night. When the world outside has fallen asleep, when the noises of life have subsided, only the wind whispers through the window, and perhaps other sounds we don't want to hear. Tonight, I want to share a special story with you. It comes from an email sent to our station a few weeks ago. The sender identified himself as Thomas Kelton, a former park ranger who worked in a remote forest in northern Alaska. He wrote in the email that it took him almost a year to be able to recount this story. Not because it was too long or complicated, but because each time he remembered it, he felt like he was returning to that place, a place where the line between our world and another became terrifyingly thin. Please listen to Thomas's story. Dear Morgan, I don't know how to start this story properly. Perhaps I should just say that I used to be a park ranger, not the usual kind you find in national parks. My job was far more peculiar than that. I was tasked with guarding a circle of forest in the deep wilderness of the north. That circle was about 750 meters in diameter, not very large. Around it was a 2-meter wide strip of barren land, not a blade of grass, just exposed rock, and beyond that, an endless primeval forest. But the strangeness wasn't in the forest's shape. The strangeness lay in my sole duty. Nothing was allowed to escape that circle. That night it was raining heavily. I sat in my small hut with a warm cup of tea in my hand, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. The corner of the house leaked, dripping water into the bucket I had placed there. My rifle leaned against my leg. From this position, I could look straight into the center of the forest, a bottomless pit in the clearing, like the mouth of a cave leading to hell. I had tried to go down there once, but the deeper I went, the more my head pounded. The pain was so intense I had to turn back. My colleague, a man named Robbie, was also there that night. He took a sip of tea and smiled contentedly. "Nothing beats a hot cup of tea on a cold day," he said. I replied, stroking my beard. "Think anything's gonna crawl up tonight?" Robbie asked. "Who knows, hope not," I mumbled. "It's been a while since the last one, must be almost time for visitors." Visitors was a dark, humorous term for the things that crawled out of the pit. We called them that because the loneliness of this place could drive a person mad. I had been here for 3 months, with 3 more to go until my term ended. But tonight, I had Robbie beside me, someone to talk to. I missed him dearly. The rain obscured visibility. On a clear day, I could sit quietly in the hut and wait for the motion sensors. But in this weather, I didn't fully trust the equipment, so we had to go out. We moved closer to the pit, hidden behind the largest trees. "Robbie," I called out to him over the pouring rain, "you're standing a bit too far out. Stay alert, someone could see you from there. Move back." He laughed and scratched his head. "Oh, you're right." We ducked down and waited. 20 minutes later, something stirred in the pit. Robbie and I watched, chatting quietly. "I think you should quit this job," Robbie said. "Being isolated like this for too long isn't good. How much longer do you have?" 3 months, 6 months in this place. Humans are social creatures, you know. "Maybe," I conceded. Robbie was about to say more, but I raised my hand, gesturing towards the pit. A dark shadow began to crawl out from underground. The creature was covered in slime. Its mandibles chattered. It had a disgusting, hard brown shell. 2 tiny eyes darted around while its antennae swiveled. Hundreds of sharp legs scraped against the wet ground. I felt nauseous. But it was okay. This kind was the easiest to deal with. I raised my rifle. Robbie did the same. And the monster was shredded by gunfire. The first shot pierced its chest, continued through, hit another creature's leg, and finally shattered the rock wall behind it. "Disgusting," Robbie mumbled. "Where do these things come from?" I didn't bother to answer. It was a question we had asked ourselves countless times. I had my own theories. From amidst the crushed remains of the centipede-like creature, a deer emerged from the pit. It lifted its head, sniffing the air. I raised my rifle. The deer bolted. "Damn it," I yelled, hesitating between the deer and my colleague. "Watch the pit, I'll be back." I plunged into the forest, chasing after it. I fired, blowing a branch to smithereens, but the deer kept running. They usually weren't that fast. I stumbled, pursued, leaping over ferns and bushes. The deer veered sideways to avoid me. I seized the opportunity, brought my rifle to my shoulder, and fired. This time, it hit. Black liquid spurted from the deer's flank. A cry, unlike any deer's, rang out as it collapsed to the ground. I wiped the sweat and rain from my forehead and immediately turned back. As I approached the clearing from the opposite side, I raised my hand to Robbie, but as I feared, he wasn't looking. He was staring intently at the forest in another direction. "Robbie," I shouted, "were you watching the pit?" Just then, a nervous man with a backpack and waterproof pants stepped out from behind a tree. A crumpled map was in his hand. Hello," he said, looking between Robbie and me. I raised my gun instantly. Robbie did the same. "What's this?" The man frantically put his hands up. "I don't understand. You're rangers, right? I'm not a poacher, I'm just lost. Really." "Where are you from?" I asked. "Excuse me, I don't think I have an accent." "Tell me where you're from now," I barked. I'm from off the brand," the man stammered. "What? Speak clearly." "Off the brand," the man yelled. "That's not a real place. Which country?" I don't." "Which country?" "This country, of course. Please don't joke around. Let me go. I'll find my own way." I exchanged glances with Robbie. Then I said, "Name any country, buddy, just one." The man trembled in the rain. Finally, he uttered a string of incoherent sounds. I aimed squarely at his chest. A hole appeared in the middle of the man's forehead. He collapsed as black liquid spurted from his face, his skin twitching. A gigantic insect leg burst through his chest. I spat on the ground. "My God," Robbie whispered. "Off the brand," Robbie repeated. "Do you think that's a real place or just random sounds?" Who knows? We continued our vigil for another 30 minutes. This time it was quieter, but having Robbie beside me still brought comfort. The rain continued to fall. "I need to pee," Robbie said. "Don't go far, just pee right there, huh? I need you alert, just pee right there." Robbie hesitated, then shook his head. "All right, I'll try not to come back too quickly. Don't want to knock you unconscious." I chuckled, but the laughter quickly died as a swarm of dark shadows began to crawl out of the pit. "Alert, Robbie, quick!" The shadows rapidly materialized. They were all replicas of myself. They weren't running towards the exit, they were running towards me. One replica shouted at me, grabbing my shoulder. "Oh God, thank God you're alive. Come with us now, we can still get you to safety." I pushed him away and raised my gun again. "Damn it, why does he keep doing that?" He turned to another replica. "Why won't he come back? What did we do wrong?" I wasn't having any of this charade. I aimed and fired, blowing a hole through the replica's neck. Red blood spurted out before turning black. The other replicas panicked, stumbling back. "5 more, Robbie," one yelled towards my colleague. "I told him to come back, we don't have to do this forever." Robbie stammered, I shot, and the replica's head exploded. 2 tried to run back to the pit. Interesting, but not enough for me to spare them. Bang, bang, 2 left, one raised his hands. "Listen, I know this might seem impossible and terrifying." He was right. I was scared to death, though I tried not to show it. "But you have to believe us. Do you know how long you've been missing?" The other one yelled angrily. "He won't listen. It's like last time." The nearest replica looked directly into my eyes. "I don't care what the others say. I won't abandon you. I swore once, and I will." Bang, I shot the imposter. His accomplice panicked, slipping on the wet grass. I brought him down. His body convulsed in grotesque ways, as if something was pushing from within. I fired a few more shots for good measure. Robbie looked at me. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Fine," I lied. I looked at the replicas' faces, now corpses. I tried not to think too much. I glanced at Robbie. Maybe I had let this charade go on for too long. Robbie's face was pale, staring towards the pit. I turned back. 3 figures were climbing out. One was waving a white flag. "Don't shoot," I squinted through the rain. "Don't shoot, it's me again." Another replica, but 20 years older. A replica of Robbie, equally aged, accompanied him. And a 30-year-old woman with a terrified expression, hands raised. "That's my daughter, you sick replicas. What do you want?" I yelled. "Listen here, you fool," the old replica yelled back. "This is the real me, the real you, and this is the real Robbie." He put his hand on the fake Robbie's shoulder and the fake daughter's. He looks so young, the girl said. She called out, "Dad, it's me, your daughter. Don't you remember? Remember our beach trip? You took us to the beach for my 10th birthday. We saw dolphins." She held up a necklace with a small, polished pebble. "You let me keep this pebble. We made it into a necklace." "Everything is about to change," the old replica said, stepping closer. "Things beyond your comprehension and the truth about this pit are just the tip of the iceberg. It's a pathway. I think you've realized that. A pathway to other places, sometimes to other worlds. But the tunnels run deep, they loop back." He punched his chest. "I'm rambling, but we're from the same loop, the same repeating path that loops back." I took a deep breath, looking straight into the eyes of this madman. With the smell of wet pine and gunpowder in my nose, I aimed and fired. Bang! Future me fell. My daughter replica screamed. Old Robbie knelt beside the corpse. "No, no," he cried. I finished him off too. The daughter replica was the hardest. Trembling, she turned to look at me, challenging me to shoot in the cold silence. "It doesn't have to be this way," she said, her voice shaking. I bit my tongue, then accepted the challenge. Bang! She fell, just another bloody corpse. Robbie stared at the bodies. The trees rustled in the rain. He looked at me. "How did you do that?" he whispered. "How did you do it so easily?" I wiped my hand across my eyes. "Nothing is allowed to escape," I said. "The rules exist for a reason." "You did it too easily," he said softly, disgust evident in his voice. "You think so?" I asked, turning to face him, my jaw clenched as the rain streamed down my chin. "So tell me, Robbie, am I wrong? Should I let these abominations out? Where do they come from? If the place they come from is good, then why do they leave? If something worse is pushing them out, then all the more reason to keep shooting." "What if they have something important to say?" he asked. "Important, forget them, it's all deception. 1 second of carelessness and I'm dead, and this—" I raised my gun and aimed it at his head. He recoiled. "Wait, hold on." He gave a strained laugh, then stopped when he realized I wasn't joking. "You're crazy. You've lost your mind. It's me. It's Robbie." "If the things from underground have good intentions, why do they always lie? Robbie." "Oh, I think you know my friend." I cocked the gun. "It was good seeing you tonight. It really was. You put on a good act. But you missed one important detail. You always miss it. Robbie's dead. Been dead for a long time. Died 2 years ago. He died protecting people from the monsters from that pit. So goodbye." Robbie's face contorted in shock. "Please," he began to say, and I fired a bullet through his forehead. He crumpled like the others. Ominous black liquid spilled onto the grass. Oversized yet unformed, insect legs burst from his shoulders and neck, twitching in the rain. I looked up at the sky and breathed slowly. When Robbie appeared tonight from the forest, I was too surprised to react. It was a potentially fatal mistake. But for some reason, the replica didn't shoot me. If he intended to kill me, he could have done it right then. He didn't. So, afterwards, I just played along to observe him. As I said, it gets really lonely out here, and I missed my friend terribly. The rain was letting up. I saw black slime bubbling from the mouth of the pit. I returned to my hut, sat on my chair with the sound of water dripping from the branches into the bucket beside me. The corpses would be gone by morning. No more visitors tonight. The black slime meant the tunnel needed time to recharge. I reached for my cup and took a mournful sip of cold tea. 3 months were over, 3 more to go. Thomas Kelton's story ends here. Listeners, I don't know what to make of what he said. The bottomless pit in the wilderness, the creatures that looked human but weren't, and especially the detail about Robbie, his long-dead friend, who still appeared to keep him company in his loneliness. Perhaps the most terrifying thing isn't the monsters crawling out of the earth, but the solitude that can drive a person to do anything, even when they know they are deceiving themselves. Thomas still sends me emails occasionally. He says he completed his 6 months and left the place. But sometimes in those emails, he mentions dreams of a black pit and Robbie's call echoing from the depths. This is Morgan H., and you've been listening to Late Night Radio Stories. The night is still long, and perhaps after this story, you'll find it a little harder to sleep. But don't worry, the light will come. It always does. Until then, keep your lights on. I am Morgan H. Tonight's rain reminds me of stories about water, not the ocean or mighty rivers, but rain. Rain can hide many things. The sound of rain can drown out other sounds, and sometimes in the dense downpour, the line between this world and another becomes terrifyingly thin. The story I'm about to tell tonight comes from another former park ranger. Unlike Thomas or Jackson, this person contacted me directly by phone. His voice trembled as if the very act of recounting the story frightened him. He didn't give me his real name, only told me to call him Ranger Mike. He used to work at a wildlife preserve in Northern California called McNeil Pines. A place that, according to him, shouldn't exist, and the things within it even less so. Here is his story. Morgan, I need someone to hear this story. I can't keep it to myself any longer. When the current administration cut staff from the National Park Service, my old job in the Everglades abruptly ended. They laid almost everyone off, leaving us with just enough severance to survive the next month. I was surprised, I was angry, I was desperate. But my supervisor, Bruce, managed to find another job and could bring one additional ranger with him. A week after being laid off, he called and invited me for coffee. "You've always been by my side, no matter the circumstances," Bruce said over a steaming cup of black coffee. My supervisor was huge, like a bear, with a thick beard, standing 63, and weighing 240 pounds, looking like a lumberjack. I trusted him like a brother. "Thank you," I said, unsure where this was going. "Listen, I have some friends at the Bureau of Land Management who have a wildlife preserve, a 6-month contract that might be renewable. Are you?" "Yes, are you ready to move to Northern California?" Bruce said. "The location is classified. This isn't a park with tourists." "Oh, sounds suspicious. Military." "All I can say for now is it's the easiest job you'll ever have. Oh, and the pay is 3 times what it was in the Everglades." Bruce slid an unlabeled manila folder across the table. I reached to open it, but he held it down with his large hand. "There's only one thing I need to know before we continue. Is this drugs?" I whispered. Bruce stared at me. "Methamphetamines," he said. I choked on my coffee. "Oh no, I don't know." But Bruce burst out laughing. "Just kidding, it's an environmentally restricted area, and you just need to sign an NDA before I say anything more." My new position was at the McNeil Pines Preserve. I arrived a few days after signing the NDA, flying to Sacramento, and then driving a few hours through winding mountain roads with no towns or gas stations. I left all traces of civilization behind and entered pure wilderness. The sun was just setting when I reached the ranger station. It was an old hunting lodge refurbished by the government, 2 stories with a cluster of radio antennas sprouting from the roof. There was something odd about the place, but it took me a while to realize it. Not until I had moved into my upstairs room, taken a hot shower, and lay down on the bed did I notice. All the windows were reinforced with iron bars. Bruce gave me a tour of the preserve the next day. There were only 2 of us working here. Cell signal was weak, but we had a high-tech comms room in the station to contact the outside world if needed. The preserve consisted of 10,000 acres of forested mountains filled with towering pine trees whose dense canopy blocked almost all sunlight, even in the middle of the day. The forest looked pristine. No trash, no roads, plenty of wildlife, but inaccessible. A 15-foot chain-link fence topped with barbed wire surrounded the entire area. No one was allowed in without federal government permission. "They're breeding mutant grizzlies in there," I asked as we drove the ATV along the perimeter. "Mostly deer," Bruce said, "not just to keep animals inside, but to keep people out." Now that I was there, Bruce could explain the whole situation. It turned out there was a railroad running through the McNeil Pines Preserve. It was now closed, but for decades it served freight trains. Most carried simple goods, food, timber, sheet metal. But occasionally they transported hazardous materials. A train carrying over 200 tons of toxic chemicals, including vinyl chloride, ethylene glycol, ethyl hexyl acrylate, and butyl acrylate, derailed in the forest 5 years ago. The spill covered most of the land. Fortunately, there were no nearby residents, so the story didn't attract much attention. Beyond a few small local articles, after the initial cleanup, the EPA ordered the entire forest quarantined for at least 20 years, with possible extensions if tests didn't improve. "Our job is to ensure that no one except the EPA enters or leaves the forest," Bruce said. "The fence has a gate located next to the ranger station, and only Bruce and I have the code to open it." Bruce was right, the job was easy. Besides managing the main gate, I managed a series of trail cameras placed about 100 meters apart along the perimeter fence. The cameras pointed both into and out of the preserve. If I caught anyone trying to breach the fence, I had to apprehend them immediately. That was it. The government paid for lodging and free groceries every 2 weeks, so I made a tidy profit for doing almost nothing. Too perfect. However, it left me with many questions. Why did we need so many cameras? There were hundreds of them monitoring every inch of the park, not to mention daily ATV patrols. Moreover, when I first checked the cameras, I noticed strange markings on the fence, not serious, just open writing. You only saw it when you were close to the fence, small scribbles carved into the metal mesh. It looked like some kind of writing, but I couldn't read it. I asked Bruce about it one evening. He said the carvings were company signatures. The Park Service hired a special company to make the fence super durable and weather-resistant, rust-proof, and all that. My God, they spent a fortune on this quarantine operation, I thought. Every night, I uploaded all the camera footage and reviewed any anomalies. The cameras only took pictures if there was movement in the frame, so most of it was tree branches swaying in the wind or squirrels running past the lens. Occasionally, a deer or raccoon would approach the fence from inside the quarantine. The preserve had a surprising amount of wildlife despite its toxic history, although the animals never looked or acted unusual. With all that dangerous stuff in there, it's a miracle anything survived. I told Bruce one evening as we drank whiskey and watched old episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond Asterisk. I don't know, he said. Life's pretty resilient no matter how the world treats it or how we treat it. I corrected, referring to the chemical spill. Bruce nodded. Still, gotta kill him if any break through the fence. Yeah, I said. I didn't like the idea of shooting mutant deer. The first few months were monotonous. Checking cameras, maintaining ATVs, watching too many episodes of Friends and occasionally letting EPA officials through the main gate. Every week, 2 black SUVs would arrive at the station, and half a dozen men and women in pristine white hazmat suits would emerge, carrying unlabeled boxes of equipment. They weren't talkative. Just running more tests, one of them said. That was the longest sentence they ever spoke to me. I'd enter the gate code, and the team would vanish into the seemingly endless forest. Sometimes for 30 minutes, sometimes all day. Neither Bruce nor I ever accompanied them. What if they need protection? I asked, thinking of potential animal attacks. They can handle themselves, Bruce replied. The hazmat suits are enough. I suddenly realized that neither of us ever wore even a mask while patrolling the forest for hours every day, while these people wore full suits. Shouldn't we be wearing something? No, the spill is deep inside, Bruce said. We're out of harm's way. That's what they tell us, I said, chuckling. Yeah, right, Bruce laughed. What do you think they do in there for so long? Don't know, soil samples, campfires. As long as our checks keep clearing, Bruce said. I nodded, but still felt something was off. The EPA officials were always deathly serious when they arrived, and they always looked dazed when they returned from testing, as if they had just gone through hell. Their blank, emotionless faces reminded me of people in shock. One day, I noticed a viscous red liquid leaking from one of their equipment boxes as they left. I almost asked what it was, but the officials quickly climbed into their SUVs and waved goodbye before speeding off. It must be blood, I told Bruce that evening. Couldn't be anything else. They're killing animals in there and bringing them back to the lab for testing. Ah, listen, Bruce put down his glass of whiskey. Best not to think too much about it. His demeanor had suddenly changed, as if I were bringing up a forbidden topic. But this is our job, don't you want to know what's going on? I asked. I mean, cleanup is the purpose of this place. Quarantine, clean up, reopen the park to the public. I never said the park would reopen to the public, Bruce said. What? Bruce just stared at the fire in the fireplace. The wood crackled, then he finished the rest of his whiskey and went upstairs. I'm going to bed. Remember to put out the fire before you come up. I had known Bruce for years, but I had never seen him like that. Everything had been jovial for weeks. We joked about super-powered toxic deer, but as soon as I mentioned the bloody equipment box, it was as if I'd hit a nerve. He became distant, even sad. At first, I thought my theory was right, and he was upset about the EPA killing animals for testing. But Bruce never loved animals. Hell, he ate beef almost every day. So he couldn't be that sad, it had to be something else. Something he wasn't telling me, wouldn't tell me, or maybe I was overthinking it. I started investigating in the comms room. As I mentioned, most of my job involved reviewing camera footage that I uploaded to the government-issued desktop computer. I was only supposed to view the previous day's footage, but after some searching, I found a folder containing the camera archives. There was footage from the establishment of the quarantine, years before I arrived. I started with the earliest images. There were no signs of a train accident or a fire. But some nighttime footage showed figures stumbling out of the forest. They appeared bruised and bloody, walking in a daze. At first, there were only a few, but the number soon grew to 6, then a dozen, then dozens. "What are you doing?" I minimized the screen and spun my chair. Bruce had just walked into the comms room to review last night's footage. "It's 6:30, time for evening patrol," Bruce said. "Oh, right, yeah." I closed everything and logged off the computer. Bruce stared at me as I left the room. He knew something was up. I figured he'd see that I had accessed the old files. As I went into the garage to get the ATV, I noticed a pair of enormous bolt cutters hanging on the tool rack. Bruce said they were only for EPA emergencies, like when the gate wouldn't open and we needed to cut an escape route for the hazmat team. I never carried the cutters with me on patrol. What good would they be? I wasn't planning on saving any mutant deer dying of toxic shock. But that evening, for some reason, something compelled me to grab the tool before heading out. They were much heavier than regular bolt cutters. I noticed they had the same strange scribblings as the mesh fence. After getting the cutters, I hopped on the ATV. My patrol duty was to drive around the entire perimeter of the park and check for anything suspicious. There was a service road running along all 14 miles of the fence. I turned on the ATV's headlights. The sun was about to set, and the entire forest was bathed in a thick, gloomy blue light. Not quite day, not quite night. The air was heavy, the sounds of the forest were muffled, almost as if everything was underwater. It was an eerie atmosphere, unlike anything I had felt since arriving at McNeil Pines. I soon found out why. Mid-patrol, I heard a voice crying for help. "Help me!" I stopped the ATV and shined my spotlight around the road. "Hello, who's there?" "Help me, please." The voice came from inside the fence. I swung my spotlight to see a gaunt figure among the tall pine trees. It was a man in his mid-40s, skeletal. His ragged clothes clung to his emaciated frame. He looked shocked and confused as he stumbled towards the fence. "Oh my God," I whispered. I got off, my hand resting on my holstered gun. The man looked like a meth addict I had seen in the Everglades, unpredictable and much stronger than normal. "How did you get in there? This forest is off-limits." "They're holding us," the man said. His skin was so pale and sickly it almost glowed. "We can't leave. They're horrible. Oh God, they're horrible." "Who's holding you?" "The demons," the man said, spittle flying from his lips. "Demons everywhere." "Stay right there," I said. "I'll get someone to help you." I turned back to my ATV and turned on my shoulder-mounted radio. "Bruce, do you copy?" "Loud and clear, what's up?" "I'm at mile marker 12. I have a man inside the fence who says he's being held captive. He looks like he's on something." "Keep him there, but do not make contact," Bruce said. "Don't talk to him, don't look at him. I'm on my way to assist." "Roger, who is that? Who are you talking to?" The man had approached the fence, almost close enough to touch. "Sir, it's going to be okay," I said. "What's your name?" "They don't give us names," the man said. "Just numbers." "Okay, listen, just calm down, all right? Someone's coming to help." "No, they won't help. They'll kill us," I sighed. It was no use arguing with this madman. Perhaps he was some backpacker who wandered too far off the trail and somehow climbed over or dug under the fence. Hopefully, he hadn't come into contact with the toxic chemicals. "We're not allowed to leave the facility, or the demons will punish us," the man said. "The demons in white suits," I said, looking at my phone. The ranger station was about 6 miles away. Bruce would take less than half an hour to arrive after starting his secondary ATV. "Please, sir, you have a kind face," the man said. "I know you'll help us." "Who is us?" I looked up to see 2 other gaunt figures standing beside the man. One was a woman in her early 20s, and the other was a terrified little girl no older than 6. "Save us, please," the little girl cried, tears streaking her cheeks. All three wore identical outfits, plain beige shirts with matching beige pants. They didn't even have shoes, just cheap flip-flops, the kind you wear in public showers. "Oh my God," I said. "This isn't just a wandering addict, this is something more serious." "Where are you from?" "From the facility," the woman said. "What facility?" "We just want to go home." That was the little girl. "Please, sir." She held out her tiny arm, a handmade bracelet dangling from her emaciated wrist, just a string with a few buttons for decoration. "Are you together?" "We're a family," the gaunt man said, pulling the woman and child closer. This was crazy. I called Bruce again. Bruce, I've got a whole family here. There's a woman and a child." "Do not make contact with them in any way," Bruce said. "I'll be there soon." He sounded breathless. I heard a faint humming sound. Was it the ATV engine? "Bruce, are you still there?" The radio only crackled. "Forget it, he won't help us," the woman said, tugging on the man's shirt, pulling him away from the fence. "No, I can see the compassion in his face." The man resisted, staying put. He just stared at me. A sudden gurgling sound drew my attention, then the woman's scream. I looked up. The little girl had fallen to the leaf-strewn forest floor, convulsing, her eyes rolled back as she gasped. "No, she's having an anaphylactic shock." The woman picked up a twig from the ground and put it in the girl's mouth, spittle drooling from her lips. "She's going to die." The man looked at me, pleading. "Do you have a first aid kit?" "I do." A part of me wanted to call Bruce again, but the girl's condition was worsening by the second. Her tiny body writhed with violent seizures. I needed to act. Now, I dashed to the back seat of the ATV, grabbed the first aid kit and the bolt cutters. Seconds later, I was kneeling by the fence, beginning to cut. Snip, snip, snip. "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." Snip. I cut the last link and a large section of the fence fell. The moment it did, an incredibly strong blast of air rushed outwards. It was a shockwave that knocked me to the ground. My head spun, my consciousness flickered like static on a TV. But in fleeting moments of clarity, I saw the family dash through the opening. "We are forever indebted to you," the man said before he and his family vanished into the gloomy forest beyond. I vaguely remembered more figures running through the exit. Then, a horde of pale bodies, long limbs with scythe-like fingers, and then everything went black. I woke up on the ground the next morning, my mouth dry and head throbbing. What? I was still lying next to the fence, which now had a huge gaping hole. The section I had cut open was pushed outwards as if something enormous had forced its way through the gap. I stood up. My ATV was still there, but it was dead. The battery was drained from running its headlights all night, and the gas was gone. I turned on my shoulder radio. "Bruce, do you copy?" Bruce didn't respond. Damn it, where is he? I eventually had to walk back to the ranger station. I kept radioing my supervisor every few minutes but only received silence. I knew something had gone terribly wrong, and my decision to cut open the fence was almost certainly the cause. Who were those people who had begged me for help last night? What was the facility they kept mentioning? Were they all on drugs? Was I high? Was the whole night a hallucination caused by toxic chemicals in the forest? All I knew for sure was that I had messed up badly. Maybe I'll lose my job over this, I thought as I finally reached the lodge. The front door was wide open and several windows had been broken. The iron bars covering the windows were bent outwards. Only a very strong person could have done that, or something. A terrible stench hung in the air and flies buzzed everywhere. I drew my pistol and stepped inside. The place was like a war zone, furniture shredded, broken glass scattered, tables and chairs overturned, and blood splattered everywhere. In the middle of the room was all that remained of Bruce. His body was torn apart, limbs severed, chest cavity ripped open. Something had eaten his internal organs while he was still alive. My old supervisor's face was frozen in a scream, his eyes wide open in horror. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. It was too much. But it was far worse. That's when I saw what Bruce clutched in his cold, dead hands, a bloody government report, top secret. After retrieving the bolt cutters from the shed, I pried open his rigor mortis fingers to retrieve the document. Its contents were somehow even more horrifying than the carnage surrounding me. There had been no train accident. It was all a fabricated story to quarantine the area and keep hunters or hikers out of the forest. The personnel I let into the fence each week were military scientists. They worked at a top-secret research facility deep within McNeil Pines. It didn't even have a name. The report simply listed it as the facility. The document contained many grainy black and white photos. They showed men, women, and even children in empty cells, their heads shaved, emaciated, horrified. There were pages of data detailing horrifying experiments, tests involving exposure to experimental neurotoxins. The scientists would monitor each person's degradation to learn how long it took for someone to go blind, for their teeth to fall out, for their heart to stop beating. I threw the document across the room in disgust. That's when I saw the shredder, a pile of shredded pages lying beneath it. There must have been dozens of documents, all cut to pieces, more evidence of the facility. After searching the rest of the lodge, I realized the report I threw across the room, the one Bruce clutched in death, was the last bit of hard evidence of the facility that remained. He had destroyed everything else. That was the humming sound I heard last night. I retrieved the bloody document and put it in my pocket. Then I left McNeil Pines forever. I drove all night until I found a cheap roadside motel near Yosemite. Once safely in my room, I took out the document and photographed every page, uploading it to my Google Drive. Just in case someone burst in right then, shot me, and burned the document. When I finally read the entire report, I noticed that the military had shifted from chemical weapons to occult ones. The last pages detailed a program involving an ancient Sumerian tablet with strange scribblings, the same writing carved into the chain-link fence and the bolt cutters. The scientists had performed some kind of blood ritual on one of their subjects, a man in his mid-40s. A grainy black and white photo showed his face. It was the same man who had come to me that night, begging to be freed. The last page of the document detailed a procedure where they drained all the man's blood into a basin made according to ancient specifications. According to the report, a figure emerged from the pool of blood an hour later. It was tall and gaunt, and incredibly powerful. I'm in this motel room now, debating whether to release the entire document to the press. It has to be soon. It won't take long for the government to realize who released their precious assets. I wish I could say I regretted what I did. Those things could cause devastation when they find civilization. There will be more casualties, maybe innocent people, but I can't get the image of that terrified family out of my head, begging for help. No matter what, I know there was still a shred of humanity in them. As I drove away from McNeil Pines, I saw one of them in its true form, 10 feet tall, long, hairless limbs with shark-like skin. It smiled at me, revealing a mouth full of fangs. Then it waved as I drove by. A small bracelet dangled from its wrist, a string with a few buttons. That's all I can tell, Morgan. I don't know what they are. I don't know what they can do, but they are out there, and perhaps that's what we deserve. Ranger Mike's story, I truly don't know what to say. If what he said is true and the details are too specific to be mere imagination, then somewhere out there are creatures that were once human, now wandering. Creatures created from horrifying experiments, from ancient rituals, from humanity's own cruelty to itself. And the most terrifying thing of all, the little girl with the bracelet. Even after transforming into a monster, she still kept the bracelet, as if some memory, some humanity, still lingered beneath the shark skin and fanged maw. The rain is stopping now, but the darkness remains thick outside my studio, and I wonder about the stories I've told tonight of places that shouldn't exist, of boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. Perhaps we don't fear the dark. Perhaps we fear what we have unleashed into it. This is Morgan H. with Late Night Radio Stories. The night is still long, and I'll be here in the warm glow of this small studio, a lighthouse in the endless night. I am Morgan H., and once again we welcome a long night together, filled with chilling tales from all corners of the world. Tonight, my broadcast cabin is shrouded in a thick fog. The surrounding pine trees are like giant ghosts. Occasionally, the wind whistles through the leaves. The temperature is unusually low. It's summer, yet it feels like late autumn. There's something wrong in the air tonight. I just received an email from a young park ranger. He didn't leave his real name, only signed off as JW, 26 years old. The content of his letter made me read it over and over again before deciding to share it with you. Here is his story. Dear Mr. Morgan H., I have always loved the quietness of nature, the peacefulness of walking through the canopies and deep into the forest. Gazing at the clear night sky is also wonderful when out in the woods. Seeing countless stars reminds me of how small we are, how insignificant our existence is. We could vanish in an instant, and the universe wouldn't even notice. My brother used to take me camping, and that's when I discovered my passion for nature. Now I just enjoy hiking or camping with friends since my brother moved overseas. I hope to see him again soon. I truly miss the times we spent together. I worry that I won't have the privilege of doing that anymore, given the situation I'm in now. But hope is all I have left. If you read this, please pray for me. I need it. I won't disclose specific details about myself because I don't believe they're important. I'm a 26-year-old man. That's all I'll say. I'll tell you how I ended up in this situation. I recently started working as a park ranger. Initially, everything seemed fine, but the fact that they hired me without an interview should have raised a red flag. I was desperate for a job because I had very little money, so I never thought about it. The day I arrived at the cabin was beautiful. The sun was setting, leaving a soft orange glow filtering through the trees. The weather was pleasant, typical fresh summer weather. Everything was perfect. The cabin was almost entirely made of wood, rustic, I thought. It was large enough for 1 or 2 people and looked very cozy inside. I walked through the door and dropped my backpack under the bed. I opened the closet and put on my pajamas. Once comfortable, I noticed a piece of paper on the table, along with a survival guide and a metal crucifix. Something felt off. I picked up the paper, and there was something very strange about it. I could feel the blood in my veins turn to ice as I began to read. Hello, my name is Killian Sutter. I was the park ranger who worked here before you. I don't want to scare you, but this job isn't what you expect. You see, strange things happen here, and they can be deadly if you're not careful. Follow what I say to survive. This paper will be your Bible. The rules I've written for you are things I discovered myself while working here. I don't know if these are all of them, but this is what usually happens here. 1. If the light bulb in the cabin suddenly starts flickering, lock the door immediately, draw the curtains, and turn off the lights. The thing will approach the cabin and try to get in. Don't panic, it will leave if it can't find a way in. 2. Always lock the door behind you when you go outside. Failure to do so will allow the thing to wait for you inside the cabin, hiding somewhere. 3. If you hear scratching from outside the cabin, don't be fooled by your ears. It's not coming from outside, but from inside. Stand still and hold your breath. The thing is blind, and it won't know you're there if you do that. It will leave when you count to 10 and bolt out the door. 4. When outside, be as quiet as possible. Otherwise, it will hear you. If it hears you, run back to the cabin and barricade yourself inside. 5. If you get injured at any time, clean the wound quickly and bandage it so no blood is visible. The thing can smell blood from very far away, and it makes it wild and frenzied. Also, change bandages frequently. When doing so, throw old bandages into the fire. 6. Never leave the cabin after sunset and before sunrise, no matter what. The thing is much more aggressive when it's dark. 7. Before going to bed, place the metal crucifix I left for you facing the cabin's entrance. 8. Set an alarm for 3:00 a.m. and wake up to check the crucifix. If there's blood on it, disregard rule number 6 and get out of the cabin as fast as you can, then run to the storm cellar. I've marked it for you on the map in the survival guide. 9. Do not try to escape the forest until your contract expires, or the thing will follow you everywhere. You have been warned. Some situations will require you to combine rules, so remember them all. Good luck, and keep yourself safe. No way, what the hell did I get myself into? Thoughts raced through my head. I was both angry and confused. I didn't know if the note was a joke or real. Maybe this Killian just wanted to scare me, but I'd rather not take the risk and follow what was written on the paper. At least until I figured out if it was fake or not. When I was hired, no one told me that someone had left before I was about to take this job. Maybe they knew I wouldn't accept if they told me this. Soon after, it got dark. I was sleepy and almost forgot to place the crucifix facing the door. Then I went asleep. The next day, I woke up and noticed a large scratch on my right arm. It was bleeding. I quickly cleaned the wound and bandaged it. I also threw my bloody shirt and bedsheets into the fire. I froze. How did this happen? Then I remembered the rule. Set an alarm for 3:00 a.m. and wake up to check the crucifix. If there's blood on it, Disregard rule number 6 and get out of the cabin as fast as you can, then run to the storm cellar. I hadn't checked the crucifix, I had to admit. I was afraid the list of rules wasn't a joke. Killian knew something I didn't, and he wanted to warn me about it. I hadn't seen the thing he mentioned in the note until now, but I was sure I didn't want to see it. Not after what happened today. I checked the crucifix for blood. It seemed fine. So why did I wake up with a large scratch on my hand? What the hell was going on? I spent the rest of the day in bed, afraid to leave the cabin and check the forest. That night, I followed the rules exactly as I should have the night before. I placed the crucifix facing the door and woke up at 3:00 a.m. to check it. It was clean. The next 5 days were peaceful, and I finally mustered enough courage to do my actual job and check the forest. I was silent and didn't attract unwanted attention. Those were the best days. I could truly enjoy being out in nature and relax a bit. I felt detached from the troubles of my life. I felt at peace. Almost as if the rules never existed, except for the nighttime rule and locking the door. I was out there enjoying myself. I missed the normal days before taking this job. I savored every last moment of those quiet days, and I'm glad I did, because everything started to go wrong. On the 8th day, I was in the cabin, reading a book on my bed, and then I heard it. The scratching sound seemed to come from outside. I remembered the rule: if you hear scratching from outside the cabin, don't be fooled by your ears. It's not coming from outside, but from inside. Stand still and hold your breath. It will leave when you count to 10. I quickly closed my eyes and froze on the bed, holding my breath. I could feel the thing's breath as it sniffed me. I thought it smelled fresh meat. A quick meal. I started counting. I was almost at 10 when I heard a loud bang. The thing bolted out of the cabin through the door. I ran and closed the door, locking it. Then I collapsed to the floor, unconscious. When I woke up near midnight, oh my God, the crucifix. I rushed to place it facing the door. Had I failed this rule? Was I going to die? These thoughts tormented me until 3:00 a.m. When I checked it, my heart began to pound, so fast it felt like it would rip through my chest. There was blood on the crucifix. In a panic, I grabbed the survival guide and a flashlight, then ran straight to the storm cellar. I could feel the thing chasing me, getting closer and closer. After 15 minutes of running, I reached the storm cellar. I dashed through the door and locked it behind me. Then I collapsed due to the pain in my left leg. I think I broke my ankle trying to escape the beast out there. I crawled into a corner and fell asleep, waking up before sunrise due to the throbbing pain in my left ankle. Then I fell asleep again. When I woke up, I wondered how I could get back to the cabin with a broken ankle. I fashioned a crutch from a wooden plank in the storm cellar and began walking back to the cabin. I had to find help. There was no cell service in the forest, and I didn't have a landline in the cabin. Besides, I wasn't a doctor and couldn't do anything for my ankle. As I walked through the forest, I could feel the thing from before watching me, laughing at me. I was easy prey. I couldn't escape it anymore. My heavy footsteps left deep marks on the ground as I grew increasingly tired. I finally reached the cabin, ate something, then thought about a risky decision. I was going to leave the forest tomorrow. I knew it was stupid, and I also knew what would happen if I did. It was written in the rules. I lost track of time as I pondered my decision, and soon it was dark. I turned on the light and immediately it began to flicker. No, not now, I told myself. I checked if the door was locked. It was. I drew the curtains and turned off the lights as instructed. Soon after, I could hear it. The thing was outside the cabin, trying to find its way in. It started scratching at the walls and slamming itself against the door. I accidentally caught a glimpse of what the thing looked like through a small gap in the window. It was tall, with pale skin like it was made of snow. You could see the veins in its skin, it was that pale. It had long limbs and large, sharp claws, but the most terrifying thing was its head. It was human-like, but it lacked eyes. It had large, dark, empty eye sockets, so dark you could stare into them and feel like you were falling into an abyss. I could feel the terrible hunger for human flesh that this creature possessed, and I was scared. It wanted to tear me apart, rip my flesh, and eat me alive. It was only a matter of time until it got me. After a while, it left, and I went to place the crucifix facing the door. I also woke up at 3:00 a.m. to check it, and it was clean. My lucky night. I needed to rest for tomorrow. I woke up the next day and prepared to leave the forest once and for all. I left the cabin and started walking towards the edge of the forest. I walked slowly because I had to use the crutch I had made earlier. Having not eaten for a long time, I was tormented by hunger. I stumbled to the ground. The sound was loud enough to attract the thing to me. I saw it approaching, baring its teeth in anticipation. I had lost. I heard something in the forest, a very loud roar that echoed through the trees and seemed to scare the thing. Then, a beast similar to this one appeared, running on all fours, and the two clashed in a fight. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The monster that had just arrived scared the other one. It ran like a wounded beast back into the dense tree line. I could see the beast was wearing a tattered park ranger uniform, or what was left of it. On the badge, I could read the wearer's name. It was clearly written, Sutter. The thing ran back into the forest, chasing the other beast. What just happened? I was very confused until I remembered that Killian Sutter was also the name of the last park ranger to work in this forest. Why was he a beast? And why was he attacking the other one? I was grateful to be alive. I stood up and continued walking out of the forest. I reached the road and got into my car. I called 911 because I was injured, cold, and scared. I passed out. Later, I woke up in a hospital bed. Something was scratching at the door, and I knew what had happened. I had broken the last rule: do not try to escape the forest until your contract expires, or the thing will follow you everywhere. Now, I just lay in the hospital bed, terrified of whatever had escaped that forest and was watching me. I could feel its hunger. It wanted my flesh, and I knew a door wasn't enough to stop it. As the hinges grew looser and looser, I prepared for my impending fate. I accepted that I was about to die, but I got lucky again. It left before the door broke. I felt like it was playing with me, preying on my fear, and it knew there wasn't much I could do. As I write this, I've been discharged from the hospital and am sitting on my bed at home. I know it's only a matter of time before I see that creature, but this time I won't run. I will face that goddamn thing. Sincerely, JW. JW's story ends here. I tried to contact him again multiple times but received no response. The last email he sent me contained only one line: "It has arrived, I am ready." The rules Killian Sutter left behind. They weren't just warnings, they were the testament of a man who sacrificed himself to protect others. And now, perhaps JW has also become part of that cycle. A lost soul in the deep forest, both predator and protector. Do you ever wonder how many park rangers out there are holding similar pieces of paper? How many people have read those rules and not believed? And how many of them are still alive to tell the tale? This is Morgan H., and you're listening to Late Night Radio Stories. After a short break, we'll return with another story from a park ranger who witnessed the inexplicable at his lookout tower. The story of a late night, a boy in a ghost costume, and a woman not of this world. Keep your lights on, folks, tonight is still long. It's late, and I'm Morgan H., am once again sitting in my small broadcast cabin in the Whispering Pines forest. The wind whistling through the leaves sounds like the whispers of lost souls. Tonight, I want to share a special story with you. It doesn't come from an email or a letter, but from a phone call with a friend, a former park ranger at a national park where I once worked. He told me about his most terrifying experience, which was also his last shift. To make the story more vivid, I will recount it from his perspective. My usual shift was daytime, from 9:00 a.m. to 5:00 p.m. like most people. But that day, we were short-staffed for the night shift because the last person on it had just quit. Lately, many people had been quitting the night shift, so I had to cover. Strangely, I had never had to work an evening shift before, and I was actually excited about it. I brought coffee and energy drinks because the shift ran from 10:00 p.m. to 5:00 a.m., and there was no way I could naturally stay awake that long. I arrived at the lookout tower just before 10 p.m. It was pitch black, and the chill of a July night had fully set in. The tower was quite tall, with many steps leading to the top. The entire area was mostly surrounded by dense forest, except for the trail I took in and a murky pond located just to the right of one of the tower's legs. The pond was covered in duckweed and algae floating on the surface. It was actually quite large for a natural marsh. I climbed up, and all I heard was the incessant chirping of crickets, the croaking of frogs, and an occasional owl hoot. When I reached the top, I fumbled with my keyring until I found the right key and stepped inside. The room was small and square. 3 of the walls were mostly glass, the other wall was opaque and had the door I had just entered. The roof sloped up like a pyramid for a short distance until it peaked, and the entire structure was made of wood. To my left was a neatly made bed and a bedside table with a lamp and flashlight on it, though I wouldn't be using the bed. On the wall next to it was the CB radio and a communication desk, which every tower had. Next to that was my refrigerator and microwave, part of a small kitchen area that extended to the other wall. In the kitchen, on the right wall, were a few cabinets, some small ones holding snacks and canned food, and another set of gigantic cabinets that I couldn't open. Perhaps they contained a vacuum cleaner and other cleaning supplies beyond my pay grade. Quite spacious. I went to the comms desk and did a standard check to ensure everything was working properly. I called the ranger station channel and said, "Donnie, looks like it's just you and me tonight." Donnie didn't answer, so I figured he was in the restroom. I grabbed the flashlight from the shelf and pulled the binoculars from a drawer. I went out onto the balcony and checked for fire hazards or any other dangers out there. After doing that, I went back inside and pulled a chair from the comms desk, placing it next to a glass wall, and grabbed a granola bar from the kitchen cabinet to munch on. I raised the binoculars to my eyes and observed the surrounding forest. No animals seemed to be active, and no birds in the sky. I scanned a few clearings to ensure no teenagers were illegally camping. Then I looked towards a distant hillside, where I saw a snowman standing alone in a clearing between the trees. Wait a minute, it's July. I looked again and saw it wasn't a snowman, but a child in a shoddy ghost costume, looking like something out of a Charlie Brown movie with large black holes for eyes that looked more like they were colored black than actual holes. The child stood still, looking directly in my direction, motionless. I didn't see the child's parents anywhere, and it was almost 11 p.m., so that was a problem. I stopped observing the child and went to the radio, calling the station. "Donnie, are you out of the restroom yet?" "Almost didn't make it, but I'm here," I chuckled. Donnie always knew how to make people laugh. "There's a kid in a sheet wandering around in the southeast area, and they seem to be alone." "Sheet? What the hell are you talking about?" "It's a ghost costume with black holes for eyes and stuff." "You mean like a Charlie Brown costume? Can you check it out?" "Yeah, I'll go see if there's anything. I'll call you back on the walkie-talkie to let you know what I find." "All right." I turned off the radio and went to the bedside table drawer to get my walkie-talkie. After grabbing it, I sat back in the chair and raised the binoculars to my eyes, zooming in on where the child had been standing. The hillside was empty, no child was there. This would make the search 1,000 times harder. I pulled up the walkie-talkie antenna and set it to the correct channel. "Donnie, do you hear me?" "Yeah, loud and clear. I'm approaching the area. I'm going up a hillside to get a better look." "Perfect. That's where I saw the child, but they've moved since then." "Okay, I'll check around to see if I find anything." I watched as Donnie appeared on the hillside, waving his flashlight around the dark area until he looked towards the tower and shrugged. "Nothing here." "Damn, hope it reappears. Until then, I'll notify the police and check missing persons reports." "Missing persons reports. All right, I'll head back." Donnie's voice faded out and I saw his flashlight disappear in the distance. The small point of light where he stood was swallowed by the darkness. "Donnie, are you still there? Donnie?" I didn't hear a response and I rushed out the door, rounding the corner to where I had seen him. I yelled his name, only hearing the echo of my own voice reverberating into the forest. And that's when it hit me. There wasn't another sound in the entire forest. The crickets and frogs had stopped chirping, the wind wasn't rustling through the leaves, everything was completely still. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears and nothing else. I shined my flashlight around the forest in a futile effort to find him. I was in such a state of fear that my throat tightened, and if I moved, I felt like something very bad would happen. I had to do something now. I turned back, and as I did, I glanced at the stairs below. At the bottom of the stairs stood a gaunt woman, horribly disfigured. She was tall, dripping wet, with black hair and dark, murky green skin wrapped around warped and broken bones. Her gray dress was tattered, and her black shoes were muddy and soaked. And her face? Her eyes were milky white, and her mouth hung open like a snake's, as if her jaw had been grotesquely broken. She let out a piercing scream of pain and began to lurch up the stairs, terrifyingly fast, snapping me out of my fear-induced paralysis. And I ran like hell inside, slamming and locking the door. There was no way she could run that fast, even if all her bones weren't broken in the wrong directions. I ran back to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife I could find, then pulled out the walkie-talkie, yelling into it, "Is anyone there? Please." Then I heard the door creak. I slowly turned back, and I froze when I saw what was there. The door was still there, locked and completely closed, undisturbed. What scared me was that the gigantic cabinet that had been locked was now wide open, with a child in a Charlie Brown ghost costume standing right in front of it. I stood there motionless until I heard the damn kid giggle. I recognized that laugh. No way! I pulled back the sheet to see one of Donnie Marvin's kids, grinning widely, holding the walkie-talkie. "Dad Joey, I got him. Haha, peed his pants like you said, right?" He and his other son laughed from the other end of the walkie-talkie. I was furious but relieved that I wasn't about to be murdered in that damned wooden tower. I snatched the walkie-talkie from him and said, "You made me piss myself, that's what you did, you little bastard. Hope you're happy." "Hearing you scream like a girl definitely made me happy," Donnie said. "Yeah, fuck you, that wasn't even me, that was your zombie." "Who, your wife?" "What's yours?" The ghost from afar looked like a zombie. "You said it looked like Charlie." "Not the ghost, you idiot, the woman on the stairs. She screamed and ran up to scare me into the tower. Geez, she must be like an Olympic athlete. Did you hire a B-Gene?" "I didn't let any woman on the stairs." When he heard he would have to work the night shift for the next few weeks until a replacement was found, my friend quit his job and swore never to return to that park. To this day, he still maintains that either Donnie never told him about that part of the joke, or he saw something completely unrelated. I, Morgan H., also started to wonder about my own night shifts. Perhaps I was lucky that the few times I worked nights, I was assigned to the north and east sections. But sometimes, on nights like these, when the fog is thick and the wind howls through the trees, I wonder, who was that woman on the stairs? Where did she come from, and why was she there at the exact moment the prank was happening? There are questions without answers. There are ghosts that are not jokes. And there are late nights when the line between reality and illusion blurs to the point where we can no longer distinguish between them. You are listening to Late Night Radio Stories. I'll be back right after this break with a third story about another park ranger who learned that sometimes the screams in the night aren't from humans, but from the most ordinary creatures we least expect. Keep your lights on, folks, tonight is still long. My dear listeners, Morgan H. is with you again for another long night on Late Night Radio Stories. Do you know? Sometimes the most terrifying things come from the most ordinary things we think we understand until they suddenly reveal a completely unfamiliar side. The story I'm about to tell has no eyeless monsters, no disfigured women climbing stairs, but it still kept the teller, another park ranger, awake for many nights afterward. He sent me this story with the message, "Morgan, sometimes our biggest enemy is our own ignorance. Please listen." There were very few occasions when I actually had to work the night shift. Most of the time, I fell asleep on the provided bed and waited for the shift to end. This story actually took place on one of those occasions. I was fast asleep on the bed, even though the mattress was hard and didn't support my back. I had checked the area and stared into the forest for about half an hour. But time passed, and my attention wandered. So I figured the only solution to boredom was sleep. In an instant, I realized I was awake and immediately sat up in bed. Something had woken me. It was one of those times when something loud happens, and you wake up but don't quite process what it was. Whatever it was, it must have been loud. I glanced at the alarm clock. It read 3:21 a.m. I rubbed my eyes to clear the lingering sleepiness and looked around for anything that might have fallen. Everything seemed to be in its place, but the lights were off, and my night vision wasn't very good. I heard something close, the tower door. The door was wide open, slamming in the wind. That must have been it. I left the door slightly ajar, and a strong gust of wind must have blown it open and slammed it against the wall. I guess it wasn't a slam. That wind was now blowing through the room, disturbing my comfortable temperature. I rolled out of my covers and jumped off the bed towards the door. I pushed it hard towards the wall, hoping to recreate the sound and trigger a memory. But the door didn't even reach the wall. The hinges held it tight. I closed the door, this time completely, and returned to my rock-hard sleeping spot. I managed to fall asleep fairly quickly before being woken again by what I assumed was the exact same thing. I still didn't hear it. I looked towards the door and saw it was still closed, undisturbed since I last looked. The alarm clock read 3:39. I had only slept for 18 minutes. Annoyed, thinking I couldn't sleep, I got up and searched the kitchen. It was the same kitchen as every other tower, and I could easily locate and check each item. None were the culprit. All the knives were still in the block, the microwave was off, the blender unplugged. The toaster didn't seem to be the cause. So, that meant it probably wasn't an electrical appliance making the noise. The floor was clean, and all the cabinets were closed. I really didn't know and gave up searching to go back to bed. I sat under the covers, still awake, now in daytime mode due to my detective work. Then I heard it. It was a scream. The scream sounded like tires screeching on asphalt. I could only identify it as a vocal sound because of the pitch changes, rising and falling in its high tone. It sounded inhuman, terrifying, and in pain. I jumped off the bed, tripping over the blankets, and looked around. By now, the scream had stopped, but it was so loud that I knew it had to have come from inside. I looked back at the kitchen. Something had to be in there. I looked from the appliances on the counter, to the drawers and utensils laid out, to the two gigantic cabinets at the other end of the kitchen. Donnie, the office joker, was on vacation in Hawaii. I had just seen him post about it this morning. There was no one else working here, so that meant this wasn't a joke. I grabbed one of the knives from the block and tiptoed to the cabinets. I put one hand on the silver handle, the other prepared with the kitchen knife, ready to defend myself. I threw the doors open and braced for an attack that never came. I saw nothing in the cabinets except the broom and other supplies beyond my pay grade. At least at first, until I glanced down at the raccoon cowering in the corner. It let out that ghastly scream, and I fell backward as it scurried past me to the safety under my rock-hard bed. Even it knew that mattress was impenetrable. I opened the door again and poked the raccoon with the broom until it finally ran outside. So maybe I had heard the door close. The poor animal must have been slammed inside by the wind. No matter, the noise was gone and I could finally sleep again. I curled up under my blankets and rested my head on my pillow in tranquil peace, completely unaware of the terrible Binny, raccoon, lying right above me in the ceiling. I was kidding about the Binny. Raccoons are known, at least in my area, for their terrible screams, which, by the way, are most often heard in the middle of the night. I myself had never had the pleasure of hearing one firsthand before this encounter. Morgan H. here. You know, the park ranger who told this story later researched raccoons. He found out that their screams can reach 100 decibels, as loud as a lawnmower. And the reason they scream? Sometimes to communicate, sometimes out of fear, and sometimes just because they can. But what makes me ponder is, if an ordinary raccoon can produce such terrifying sounds, what kind of sounds can other creatures out there, things we haven't discovered, haven't understood, produce? How many people have heard screams in the night and assumed they were devils, ghosts, or monsters, when in reality it was just nature displaying its unfamiliar side? And conversely, how many people have dismissed truly alarming screams thinking, oh, it's just a raccoon? Tonight, as you lie in bed, if you hear something outside your window, a scream, a moan, a whisper, ask yourself, is it nature or something else? And more importantly, do you really want to know the answer? We'll take a break here. When we return, I'll share the next installment in a series of stories about mysterious disappearances in national parks, about children vanishing right before their families' eyes, about men in black suits appearing where they shouldn't, and a pair of glasses that perhaps should never have been found. Keep the light beside you, folks. The darkness still holds many secrets. My dear listeners, Morgan H. is with you again for another long night of late-night radio stories. This morning, I received an urgent email. The sender identified himself as Mark, a park ranger at Glen Rock State Park. He wrote, "Morgan, I need someone to know about this. If something happens to me, at least the story will remain." I will read Mark's email word for word. I started working for Glen Rock State Park 3 months ago. It was supposed to be an easy job, not dangerous mountain terrain full of cougars and wolves, but just a relatively flat, deciduous forest. That's why I was surprised when, after only a few days on the job, I was pulled into a search and rescue mission. Again, this wasn't dangerous terrain where many hikers go missing. I often saw young families with toddlers on the 1-mile trail to the waterfall. People went for light jogs, picnics, and barbecues, bringing their little ones to play in the stream. The surrounding towns were safe, the terrain was easy. The biggest threat we had were black bears. These, don't get me wrong, can be very dangerous, but still far from cougars, cliffs, and lurking serial killers. Anyway, the missing person was a young woman in her early 20s. Her name was Heather Rick, and she had taken the red trail with her dog, a 3-mile loop into the woods. Again, like all the trails, it was an easy hike, which shouldn't have caused her any problems, assuming she didn't have any underlying health conditions. But she didn't come home. Her boyfriend called the police, worried sick about her. He quickly ruled out all other possibilities. She wasn't the type to just leave. They had plans for the next day. He hadn't heard from her by phone, no credit card activity. She had vanished without a trace. We began our search. 2 other park rangers accompanied me, Donnie, a young man still working on his degree, and Miranda, an older woman who had worked here for years. We started together on the red trail, sweeping the forest for signs of Heather. I knew we were in for trouble when we found her dog. It was wandering about 400 meters off the trail, panting and exhausted. Donnie took it back to the ranger station to feed and water it. We searched the surrounding forest, trampling leaves and sweeping the bare trees, but found no other sign of Heather. Miranda cursed under her breath. Damn it, another one. Another one? Do people go missing here often? We've had a few bear attacks, 3 in the last year. With that grim note, we continued deeper into the forest. About halfway, Miranda and I split up. She went south and I went north. Do you have a compass, Mark? She asked as we set off. No, I have my phone. Signal sometimes gets lost. She rummaged in her bag and pulled out a compass. I have a spare. Take this. I took it to be polite but didn't intend to use it. The park was only about 1 or 2 miles wide. Unless I found myself deep in a cave somewhere, I would have signal at every point in the park. We continued in opposite directions. Eventually, I came to a stream. I followed it as I continued north, watching the dark water roll over the rocks. The gentle splashing sound calmed me. It sounded like the white noise machines that are supposed to help you sleep. I pulled out my phone just to check if I was going in the right direction, and that's when things started to get weird. When I opened Google Maps, the map didn't show the stream next to me. Generally, map schematics, whenever I use them, will show a small blue line where rivers and streams are, even if they're relatively small. I switched to satellite view. Same thing. No cut or gap in the sea of trees to indicate a stream was there. Just pure forest stretching in every direction. I guess the trees were tall enough to obscure it. I went to the stream. The dark water pounded over the rocks, glistening in the filtered light from the canopy above. My own reflection looked back, distorted by the rippling water. I dipped my finger in. The water felt slightly warmer than usual, not by much, but here in November, I expected it to be ice cold. Instead, it was just cool. I shook my head and stood up, then continued deeper into the forest. Heather, I called out, scanning the trees. Heather, can you hear me? No answer, just birds chirping, wind rustling leaves. I lost sight of the stream as I continued north, and then about 20 minutes later, I found something of Heather's. My heart stopped when I saw it, a purple wool hat lying on the forest floor. It was one of the items she was last seen with, according to her boyfriend. I had a whole list of things to look for, things that might belong to her. I took a picture and texted Miranda and Donnie. When they didn't respond immediately, I decided to go deeper into the forest. Maybe she was still alive. Maybe she needed my help. I continued to push forward, scanning the forest floor for her white puffer jacket, her pink sneakers. Anything that would stand out against the brown mass in front of me. And about 10 minutes later, I saw a flash of another color. I ran towards it, my heart pounding, and found her jacket on the ground. Except there was something wrong with it. Her jacket was perfectly placed on the ground. It wasn't crumpled or twisted or tangled as you'd expect if she had been in a struggle with an attacker. It was neatly laid on the leaves, not even a wrinkle, and it was zipped up. The gears in my brain turned as I stared at it. That meant someone had zipped it up after it left her. Unless she intentionally took it off, zipped it up, and left it there to pick up later. But that didn't make any sense. Temperatures had ranged from 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit all week, even at the warmest part of the day. No one voluntarily took off their jacket and left it in the forest. That could only mean one thing. Someone had left it here on the ground, intentionally for us to find. I looked up and scanned the trees, my heart pounding. The forest was silent now. Too silent. I didn't hear birds chirping or leaves rustling. Just pure silence ringing in my ears. And then, asterisk ping, ping, ping. I jumped about a foot when my phone made the text message sound. My hands trembling, I pulled it from my pocket to see a message from Miranda. Get back to the ranger station immediately. As I glanced at the photo of the hat I had sent her, I noticed it was also perfectly placed on the ground. I quickly took a picture of the jacket and sent it over. I found her jacket, but it looked staged. 3 dots appeared, indicating Miranda was typing a reply. Then, "Get out of there now, Mark." The sound of a branch breaking. I looked up and saw movement among the trees. I couldn't see anything amidst the crisscrossing trunks and obscuring leaves, just a fleeting shadow, a movement. I started to sprint. A few minutes later, I took out my phone to make sure I was going the right way. It took longer than I wanted, but I finally made it back to the trail. Even though my lungs were burning and my legs ached, I forced myself to sprint back towards the ranger station, the visitor center at the front of the park, gasping for air. Then I burst inside and collapsed into a chair. Miranda was on the phone with someone. She looked at me as I entered, then continued with the unknown caller. "Yes, immediate evacuation. Tell them it's another bear attack and it's not safe." A pause. "Give me a call when you're done." She hung up the phone and turned towards me. "We're evacuating the park. Can you set this up at the trailhead?" She tossed me a roll of yellow caution tape, then handed me a red, closed sign. Okay. Donnie will be here any minute. When you see him, tell him to help you clear the parking lot. Davis and Jackie are clearing the trails, so they don't need help there." I had a million questions, but I did as I was told. Donnie returned just as I was putting up the sign, and the 2 of us cleared the parking lot. Less than an hour later, the park was empty, the gates closed, and the 5 of us were holed up in the ranger station. Jackie, Davis, and Miranda seemed to know something we didn't. They whispered together in the back room with the door locked. That left Donnie and me sitting in the main room with nothing to do. "She doesn't want us to leave," I said, tapping away at a stupid mobile game on my phone. "This is ridiculous. We're not doing anything here." "Still getting paid, though," Donnie replied. "Isn't that a good thing?" "Yeah, I guess." An awkward silence fell between us. Donnie was about 10 years younger than me, I think, and I wasn't sure what I had in common with a teenage Jay. I racked my brain for something to say, but came up blank. "She didn't tell you what's going on?" I asked again. He shook his head. "It can't be bears. I think it's a serial killer on the loose," he said. "But they're not putting it on the news because they don't want to panic people. I mean, placing her clothes so neatly, luring you out there. That's definitely serial killer behavior." "Very helpful, Donnie," I thought sarcastically, but I kept the comment to myself. I got up and went to the window. It was starting to get dark. The sky was turning a deep blue in the twilight. All the animals active at dusk had begun to stir. Birds flew to their nests, deer moved. I reached to pull the curtain, something caught my eye. No, the caution tape I had carefully strung across the trailhead was torn in half. The closed sign lay on the ground. I squinted. My heart began to pound. It had been fine 20 minutes ago after we cleared the parking lot. Maybe it was just a deer. Maybe a deer tripped on it and tore it with its antlers. But as I stood there staring into the darkness, I saw something else. A shape right at the edge of the trees on the other side of the parking lot. It wasn't moving. I squinted, but in the dark, it could have been anything. A strangely shaped tree trunk, a fence post, a bush. Yet the way my eyes immediately picked it out. I wondered if it had been there before. If it was someone standing there, I squinted. The door creaked open behind me. I turned to see Miranda, Jackie, and Davis enter the main room. Donnie stood up and started asking them about the bear attacks. I turned back to the window. My blood ran cold. The shape was no longer there. "Black bears are more aggressive than you think," Miranda was explaining to Donnie. "Never stand between a sow and her cub. It'll rip you to shreds." "I have an uncle in Fort Wayne." I pulled the curtain. The metal rings creaked on the curtain rod. Then I turned back to the 4 of them, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm going to the bathroom," Donnie interrupted, brushing past them. "You guys are still paying for bathroom time, right? Like the clock's still running." Miranda rolled her eyes. "Yes, Donnie." He disappeared to the back of the building. This gave me the perfect time to confront them. Miranda glanced at me, then continued towards the door. Jackie and Davis followed her. No goodbyes. She reached for the doorknob. "Wait, you can't go out there. I saw something in the forest." The 3 exchanged glances. Miranda took her hand off the doorknob and turned towards me. "What did you see?" Someone was standing there, right at the edge of the trees, and the caution tape was broken, torn in half. I glared at her. "Are you going to tell me a bear did that, or are you going to tell us what's really going on?" She glanced between Jackie and Davis. All right, fine. She sat down across from me and sighed. We think there's some kind of serial killer on the loose. What? It only started happening a few months ago. This town, this park, has always been very safe. The worst incident we had in 5 years was someone letting their dog off leash, and it bit someone. We had nothing. No weirdos, no bear attacks, nothing. But then 3 months ago, Emily Johnson went missing. She disappeared after going for a jog on the Red Trail. It was all over the news, especially since she was a pretty blonde girl in her early 20s. Missing white woman syndrome and all. Everyone had all sorts of theories that she was abducted by a stalker or some kind of serial killer. We had volunteer search parties scouring the woods, park rangers scouring the woods, everyone. We even had people leaving flowers and teddy bears along the Red Trail where she disappeared. And that's when the next incident happened. Miranda hesitated, glancing at Jackie then Davis. One of these people, a prayer group or something, vanished. It was an older woman who had known Emily as a student or something. She just disappeared without a trace. We doubled our search efforts but found no trace of her either. In the past 3 months, a total of 5 people have gone missing. All women, all from the Red Trail, never from any other trail. She grimaced. Then, one morning, while on patrol about a week after the second woman disappeared, Jackie found Emily's sneakers, and it was just like your photos of the hat and jacket. The shoes were placed next to each other, and the laces were tied in neat little bows. Clearly staged, intentionally placed there for someone to find. That's horrific, I said. I can't even imagine. It gets worse, Miranda replied, crossing her arms. A week later, we found Emily's necklace, in the ranger station. We changed all the locks, of course, and the police have been here many times, but they found nothing. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced back at the window, but it was too dark now to see across the parking lot. I stood up and pulled the old curtain across the window, then returned to my seat. Clearly, this whole thing is a game with him, Jackie said. He likes to see us scared. I mean, if he ever had access to the ranger station, he could easily sneak up behind one of us and kill us. But that's not what he wants. He wants to scare us, to watch us squirm, to play with us like a cat plays with the mouse it's going to eat. But the police are looking for him, right? Do they have any leads? I asked. Police? Miranda shook her head. Basically, they're useless. I mean, they're investigating, they've ruled out some avenues, but they haven't really identified anyone. No suspects, at least no one they've told us about. They keep saying they'll find him, but they never do. That's because it's not a him, Davis interrupted. Miranda rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, not this again. There are some things we've seen with the case that don't make sense with what a human would do. A few weeks ago, I saw this shadow a few hundred yards through the trees. I started chasing it, but it moved too fast. Even Bolt couldn't run that fast. Davis, and there are the howls, he continued. We only hear them at night, around midnight. They sound like a horrible mix of a screaming woman and a dog howling. That's a northern saw-whet owl, you idiot, Miranda snapped at him. And it disrupts electronic fields. If it's anywhere in range, your phone will lose signal. That's why I always make sure to carry a compass, not rely on GPS. Wait, I glanced from Miranda to Davis. She gave me the compass. I don't trust him, she said, shaking her head. I just think a compass is more reliable than a phone. But she sounded a bit uncertain as she said it, as if she didn't quite trust him, but also didn't rule out the possibility of some cryptid running wild in the forest. Look, Davis stood up and approached. I pulled out my phone, he swiped his finger across the screen, then handed it to me. Look at that picture, he said. You can't tell me there isn't something extremely messed up going on here. I looked down at the screen. It was a grainy picture of the forest, zoomed in as much as the camera could. Between 2 birch trees, there was a dark, amorphous shape. It was extremely tall, probably about 8 or 9 feet. The problem was, because the resolution was so bad and it was obscured by trees, you couldn't really tell what it was. It could have been anything from a tree trunk to random debris to a weird compression artifact. Yeah, great photo, I told him. I heard the howl at the same time, he replied, echoing across the forest. I thought you only heard howls at night, Miranda snapped at him. Usually at night, Jackie heard it during the day. Jackie cringed, looking embarrassed. Actually, I saw something out there, I told Davis. It wasn't super pale, it looked like a person moving through the brush, wearing a light-colored shirt. "That's the whole point," Davis replied. "We're dealing with a skinwalker. This is its true form in the photo. It can shapeshift to mimic people, so what you saw was probably the skinwalker in someone else's form." All right, now I could see why Miranda had such disdain for Davis. He didn't just think there was something unexplainable in the forest. He thought it was specifically a shapeshifting skinwalker whose mere presence disrupted electromagnetic fields around us, hiding out in this small state park in the middle of nowhere. I wouldn't be surprised if the next words from his mouth were something like, "I saw it buying donuts at Latham Bagel Shop." We sat there in awkward silence. I tried to think of something that wouldn't completely insult Davis, but also wouldn't encourage him. The last thing I needed was for everyone at this job to think I was a cryptid fanatic like him. "Can you go find Donnie?" Miranda asked, turning towards me. "It's been about 20 minutes. I guess so," I said, standing up. But as soon as I stepped out of the front room, I heard Miranda, Jackie, and Davis talking in whispers. I lingered just outside the door for a moment and caught a few snippets of their conversation. "Can't tell him that. Does she really think?" I strained my ears. "Hurry up, Mark." Reluctantly, I walked down the hall and up the stairs to the small attic where the only bedroom and bathroom were. Donnie didn't answer. I went straight to the bathroom door. "Donnie, are you just playing on your phone?" Silence. A sense of unease settled in my stomach. I raised my fist and knocked on the door. It creaked open under my fist. My heart sank when I saw the light was off. "Donnie," I called out, my voice trembling. "Are you in here?" My fingers fumbled along the wall for the light switch. Click, I froze. Donnie was lying on the floor, his shirt soaked in blood, spreading across the tiles and seeping into the grout. His eyes were closed. I don't remember screaming, but I must have, because immediately afterwards, Miranda, Jackie, and Davis stomped up the stairs. They ran in behind me, the world turning into a mess of colors and noises as they rushed to help him. But I just stood there, frozen, my legs trembling beneath me, because on the counter was Heather's purple hat, neatly folded beside the sink. Mark's email ends here. He sent one more short email afterwards. "Donnie survived. He's in the hospital, but I know it will come back. It's not done with us." Listeners, there are forests in this world that we should not enter. There are secrets that nature keeps hidden, not because it wants to play games with us, but because some truths are too horrifying to face. The predator in Glen Rock Park, whether human or something else, has not been caught, and perhaps it is listening to this very program right now, smiling in the dark. This is Morgan H. We'll be back after this short break. Be careful when you walk in the woods, folks. And remember that sometimes the most terrifying thing is not what we can see. Dear listeners of Late Night Radio Stories, I am Morgan H., and tonight from my small broadcast cabin in the Whispering Pines Forest, I bring you a story that might keep many of you awake. A few weeks ago, I received a long letter from Alaska. The sender did not leave his real name, only information identifying him as a former park ranger who had worked in the wilderness of northern Alaska. What he wrote made me read it over and over again, not because I disbelieved it, but because it was too horrifying. I will read his letter verbatim. "Dear Mr. Morgan H., I have listened to your show for years. On nights when I couldn't sleep, I would turn on the radio and listen to your voice tell chilling stories from all over. Today, I decided to write and tell you my own story. A story I haven't told anyone for many years. I worked as a park ranger in northern Alaska from my 20s until my mid-30s. I initially took the job to escape my old life, but gradually I learned to love it. The endless wilderness, the snow-capped mountains, and the way every sound was muffled in the blizzards. There was no light pollution. The stars above looked like tiny diamonds. And in winter, the aurora borealis appeared, twisting and shimmering with strange colors, like something from another world. But a few years ago, things became much worse. People began disappearing with alarming frequency, and I started having strange experiences around the park and nature reserve. One of the strangest parts of the story began on a cold, pitch-black night in 2018. I was driving a snowmobile in a terrible blizzard, where conditions were almost impassable. The snow fell so thick and fast it looked like a shimmering, moving white wall surrounding me. Another park ranger, a big man named Ace Acosta, was driving a snowmobile behind me. Looking at him, standing tall at 66, With the majestic mountains rising into the night sky behind him, I thought this would make a great photo. As I looked around, I saw faint tracks in the snow. Ace's headlights shone directly on them, and I had almost run them over without realizing. This was quite easy to do when snow was falling several inches an hour. At first, I thought they were the frozen tracks of a wounded animal. I saw drops of blood soaking into the surface ice first. Following their direction, I realized there were footprints pressed into the ice crust, leading from my position towards the flat ground. I squinted, knelt down, and leaned closer. I didn't want to disturb the tracks. I quickly realized I was looking at human footprints, bare human footprints. But who would be out here barefoot in December in -40-degree wind? They would die very quickly. Just to drive across the wilderness, I had to wear 3 coats: strip underwear, snow pants, thick jeans, a ski mask, and multiple layers of socks, gloves with hand warmers. I wore special waterproof boots with composite toes that wouldn't freeze like steel toes, and even then, I was cold. I moved forward and saw handprints mixed with the footprints, all covered in blood. The ice crust was thick enough to cut open human hands and feet. No doubt, an undeniable logical conclusion. Someone had passed through here, possibly naked, on all fours, and their frozen corpse would be somewhere ahead. I sighed, turning to Acosta. He was still standing in the same posture, his face covered in a red scarf, revealing only his eyes. I saw one eyebrow, covered in ice, raised as if in question. "I think we have a corpse somewhere nearby," I said, climbing onto my snowmobile and starting it. He did the same. "What crazy addict would be wandering out here naked?" Ace asked in his deep voice. "Man, I need a hit of whatever that guy's on. I'm wearing 2 sweaters and 2 winter coats, and I'm still cold. Aren't you, Kelton? What do you think?" He began playfully elbowing me. I frowned, not responding. Ace always had sarcastic comments. He had sat next to me when I interviewed for this job at the recruitment center in Washington State. The elderly woman interviewing was a cold, gruff type with thick bifocal glasses that magnified her eyes twice their size. She spat out each question like a drill sergeant talking to a raw recruit. "Are you a member of any religious organization?" she snapped. Ace shook his head. "No, ma'am, but I am a member of an unorganized religion," he said. "We call ourselves servants of the elder gods. We're waiting for the ancient reptilian deities at the bottom of the ocean to awaken." So far, however, they haven't responded to any of our messages. I thought about this as I revved the engine twice, a signal that I was about to depart and he should keep close. We set off, going slow and staying as close to the tracks as possible without destroying them. But the tracks just kept going. The bloodstains seemed to fade as we moved forward. And strangely, the distance between the hand and footprints also began to lengthen, as if someone was running on all fours and gaining speed. We were approaching the conifer forest when I saw a flash of white light ahead. The thing running away from us was human-shaped, but I knew instantly it wasn't human. It ran on its hands and feet, completely naked, its skin a pale, lifeless white. It turned its head towards the snowmobile headlights. For a moment, I saw a hairless creature with skin stretched taut over its emaciated, monkey-like body, its lips permanently eroded, pulled back from its mouth. Beneath, rows of dark, reddish, mottled teeth covered in dried blood were exposed. Its nose was just 2 uneven holes, and its eyes, they reflected the snowmobile lights like a raccoon's or a kangaroo's. They were large and sunken in its grotesquely starved face, and I saw what was leaving the bloodstains. This creature, as far as I could tell, was completely unharmed. In its permanently snarling mouth, amidst the rows of sharp, crooked, blood-stained teeth, it held the corpse of an infant. The baby's head wobbled back and forth, its neck seemingly broken, and blood continuously dripped from its mouth and nose. There were deep wounds on the tiny parka, semicircular tooth marks that must have broken its ribs. The bloodstains in the snow were fading because the heart no longer beat in the body that left them. I had a loaded rifle in my snowmobile and wore a 12-gauge shotgun around my waist, mostly in case of bear or moose attacks. I always loaded the shotgun with slugs, which in my experience were the most versatile rounds for bringing down large animals. A .308 could bring down a polar bear, at least with a precise headshot, or maybe just anger it on a bad day. But a slug to the head or heart would drop any bear or moose. Of course, the thing in front of me wasn't a polar bear. For all I knew, it could be far worse. I looked down at my speedometer, seeing I was doing 20 miles an hour in the dark, in a blizzard. Yet this strange, humanoid creature was still outdistancing us. Its seemingly boundless energy still propelled it forward at superhuman speed. Its pale, skeletal limbs pumped back and forth so fast they were just a blur. It held its sharp teeth around the dead child's nape like a mother cat carrying its kitten. I kept one hand on the handlebars while trying to get the shotgun strap over my head. I slowed down below 20, and the creature responded by running faster. It was making its way into the mountainous forest, which began only a few hundred feet away. I got the gun free and quickly stopped the snowmobile. Raising the gun, I aimed carefully, taking a deep breath to steady myself. I fired, though I don't know how far. Shotguns have the disadvantage of significantly reduced accuracy at longer ranges than rifles. But by the time I took out my .308, I knew the creature was long gone in the bushes and trees. By now, Ace had also stopped and opened fire, but the creature was already gone. "Damn it," Ace yelled. "That bastard was too fast. Can't believe it got away after all that." I sighed heavily. "I think we should go find out where it got the baby," I said. "Maybe we have more corpses than we think." We found a radio in the snowmobile and reported what had happened, or at least the basic version. I omitted the details about the naked, semi-human monsters, only saying it was an unidentified animal. There wasn't much law enforcement in this region because there were so few people. Park rangers, as well as forest rangers, regularly worked with the police in small towns, at least where there were police. Dozens of local tribal villages had no police. These people would come to park and forest rangers first, and were always the friendliest and most helpful residents of the district. When we returned to the original bloody footprints, the snow had completely covered them. However, based on the direction the creature had run and where the tracks originated, I thought I knew where it might have started. Following a straight line to Lena Peak Trailer Park, Ace and I sped at maximum velocity across rolling hills and flat plains. The snow fell faster and thicker. They say Eskimos have dozens of words for snow. And after working as a park ranger here, I can say I've seen every variation of it thousands of times. This was the wet type, with large flakes, and it tended to stick to everything. We would probably have to find shelter soon, especially if the snow got heavier. I heard the screaming before I saw the chaos. As I rounded a sharp right bend where the dirt road turned into the trailer park, I saw dozens of people outside, swarming like flies around a trailer in the back corner of the park. All the lights in that trailer were on, and I saw a woman comforting another who was crouched down, crying. Although most people knew us, I still pulled out my badge, confirming I was a federal law enforcement officer. Here, all park rangers were technically federal agents, authorized to carry guns and make arrests like regular police. Except, we were licensed under the Department of the Interior instead of state law enforcement agencies. I ran into the trailer, and after a quick glance, I knew there was no need to call an ambulance. Ace followed close behind. His heavy footsteps made the trailer shake slightly as he stepped up the stairs. We didn't say anything for a long time. The entire family was dead, blood everywhere, even splattered on the ceiling. Most of it had frozen in the cold, and I wondered how long the door had been open. Body parts were scattered on the floor, an arm in the corner of the room, a head propped up on the kitchen counter, even a tooth stuck in the drywall. The brutality was horrific, and the strength required to carry out such an attack must have been extraordinary. "I think we need more than just the two of us," Ace said. I nodded, already exhausted and so much work to do tonight before I could sleep. We called state and federal authorities in the area. Since most of the land was tribal-owned, we had to work with multiple branches. Eventually, the CSI team arrived in the middle of the blizzard. Although they had to travel over 3 hours, we simply secured the scene while we waited, constantly being pulled into neighboring trailers where villagers told us the latest rumors. They also brought us hot coffee and tried to extract information as they usually did in such situations. "No, honestly, Maggie," Ace was saying to an old woman wrapped in an antique fur coat. "I don't know any more than you do. You can be sure you'd know if I knew." Just then, police cars began arriving, one by one. Ace and I told them a simplified version of the night's events, said our goodbyes, and left the scene to them. I went home and took a scalding hot shower, trying to chase the night's cold out of my bones. Then I fell into a deep sleep, though I had nightmares of the creature's face turning towards me, the dead baby in its mouth, and looking at me with those blank, reflecting eyes. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I slept in my bed for many days. The state police assigned us an officer the next day, saying they wanted official representation for their interests in the case. By this point, it was a fairly high-priority case. We didn't even have many assaults or robberies here, less likely to be murder. And the murder of an entire family really stirred up the locals. The fact that the CSI technicians couldn't make sense of it only worsened the situation. They hadn't even agreed whether it was human or animal or a combination of both, like men with rabid fighting dogs. With no leads, they wanted us to go back to where we saw the creature last night and see what we could find. The officer would accompany us, a woman named Officer Melinda Jensen. She seemed new to the job and hadn't realized how bad it was yet. She was bright and eager. And when she shook my hand, she almost crushed the bones under her iron grip. I saw Ace wince as he shook her hand too. When she turned her back, he looked at me with one eyebrow raised, as if to say, "What can you do?" It didn't take long to find the spot from last night. As we approached the forest where the creature had disappeared, I saw a branch that had been hit by a shotgun blast, and I knew we were in the right place. In daylight, I saw there was a gently curving trail through the trees, possibly an old deer trail. It was just wide enough for our snowmobiles if we went slow. Occasionally, I had to get off because I was in the lead and move large branches lying across the path. But overall, movement was faster than I expected. The trail went over a gentle hill, down a slope, then spiraled up around the mountain. We were at least 7,000 feet above sea level, and the view stretched for hundreds of miles. It was breathtaking, looking at the frozen white landscape below, mountain ranges extending to one horizon and the Arctic Ocean on the other side. However, a few hundred feet ahead, the trail stopped. I saw a hole in the mountain. Slowly bringing my snowmobile closer, I looked inside and saw natural rock corridors. The corridors sloped downwards at an angle without steps. A strange silence emanated from the thickening darkness. The other two snowmobiles shut down just behind me, and Officer Jensen stepped forward, turning on her LED headlight. Immediately, I saw a piece of light blue fabric. I stepped forward, bending down to confirm what I had suspected. This was a piece of the missing child's clothing. "Enough evidence. Let's go," Jensen said. "I want to be back before sunset." She continued without waiting for confirmation. Ace and I put on our backpacks and turned on our headlights. I tried using the radio and satellite phone to share our location, but neither worked. The artificial light showed the natural rock walls of the corridor continuing deep into the mountain. A warm gust of wind blew past me, followed by a sour sulfur smell. "This is just a body recovery mission," I whispered to Ace, putting some distance between me and Jensen so I could talk. "So why are we risking our lives here? We should wait for reinforcements." Both of us knew the child was dead and had been dead for a while. "You know what I'm thinking?" Ace whispered conspiratorially before a low hiss made us all stop and ended the conversation. I never got to hear what he was thinking. By now, the hiss had intensified and was answered by dozens of others echoing further down the rock corridors. Officer Jensen had drawn her gun. I was surprised to see it was a Ruger .454, a large-caliber handgun with good stopping power. I saw enough magazines around her hip to take down a herd of buffalo. I also unslung my shotgun, making sure it was loaded only with slugs. "Do you know what we're up against?" I asked her. Ace was right behind us, shotgun cocked and loaded, barrel pointing downwards. By now, I was sweating heavily. The air in the tunnel kept getting warmer, feeling like walking into a sauna. Thin wisps of steam and hot condensation clung to the smooth granite ceiling. The corridor continued to slope downwards at the same incline, but now I could see something at the bottom. "Not much more light than you guys," Officer Jensen said with slight disdain. "My only advice is shoot first, ask questions later, kill anything that moves. This place has taken many lives, people too fat and slow to defend themselves." I squinted, observing the light. They seemed to emanate from some kind of organism growing on the rock surface. Not electric lights, and certainly not natural sunlight. It glowed like the light of millions of blue-purple fireflies, coloring the granite floor and walls in a completely different light. We were moving as quietly as possible now, but I still hadn't seen anyone. We reached the end of the rock corridor, where strange mushrooms glowed in the dark. Their mycelial threads emitted that bright black light everywhere as they spread across the threshold. I turned off my LED, saw my teammates do the same, then poked my head through, looking left and right. I saw more creatures like the ones before, missing lips, pale skin, large, frantic eyes. They constantly contorted and jerked their heads to the left or right, as if listening for something only they could perceive. Two were dragging a butchered and torn moose between them. Another was dragging the corpse of an old man forward by his raised feet. I saw the old man's head was missing, his wrinkled hands dragging behind his body. I watched to see where all this activity led, and then my jaw dropped. A gigantic insectoid monster sat lazily slumped against the rock wall as these creatures brought meat to it. The monster was so fat I wasn't sure it could stand up. It had a blood-red chitinous shell with a cobra-like hood extending around its head. Its teeth chattered constantly as it crammed more bloody offerings into its mouth, causing blood to spurt forward in thick streams, dripping down its chin. Its long, slender arms had razor-sharp fingers, and its 6 legs branched out like a praying mantis, spread out on either side of its body, glowing deep red in the strange light of the room. Its belly distended far in front of its body, and to my horror, I saw it lay a clutch of eggs, each the size of a dog. Their surfaces writhed and trembled, looking taut and ready to burst at any moment. The creatures feeding and tending this monster rushed over, dragging the eggs to a warm corner of the room. I saw dozens of others there, and some had already hatched. Whatever that monster was, it had given birth, and now those things were walking around, completely free to kill anything or anyone they wanted. This was the nightmare that happened years ago when I was a park ranger. I still remember standing there, feeling detached and strange as I looked down at the grotesque scene below. "Oh, God in heaven," Ace whispered in the purple light of the cave. In front of us, a bright red hand reached forward and grabbed the headless man's corpse. It lifted the corpse with ease. I watched the beast open its jaws wide enough to swallow the corpse without difficulty. Closing its mouth, it spewed more blood down its face and onto the smooth rock floor in front. Dark red bloodstains spread across the floor 20 feet in front of the creature, looking like frozen Rorschach blots in the stinking cave. "We need to go deeper," Jensen said, looking from me to Ace with a grim expression. "Are you crazy?" Ace said. "Do you want to die? There could be thousands of them down there." But the decision was quickly taken out of our hands when we heard screaming, a young, high-pitched voice. We all looked down and saw the white mutant creatures dragging out a young boy. The same boy I recognized from the photo on the trailer park scene's wall. The boy had cuts and scrapes all over him and was trembling, perhaps from hypothermia or fear or both, but he was alive. His eyes were wide open as he was dragged by his small hands towards the giant red insectoid beast in the corner. "Damn it," I whispered, looking at Ace and Jensen. "All right, Jensen and I will hold point. Ace, you cover our rear, we'll form a triangle and start firing. When one reloads, the other two provide cover. Ace, you need to periodically check our backs to ensure no ambush. Now go." They didn't question my orders. No one had time. To save the boy, we needed to act immediately. We started moving down the smooth rock floor, only a few hundred feet from the enemy, in unknown numbers. I fired first, aiming my shotgun at the nearest group of mutants and pulling the trigger as fast as I could. The first shot blew open one's chest, continued on, hit another's leg, and ended by blasting rock shards from the wall behind them. I saw it all in slow motion, adrenaline pumping and the heightened awareness of battle taking hold. The second shot hit the nearest one's head. It exploded like a broken vase, blood and bone flying in all directions. I saw the one holding the boy fall as Jensen hit it with her Ruger. A magnificent shot that missed the boy and blew off the creature's head. It looked quite risky, especially with a pistol. But I could tell she had experience and marksmanship skills. However, I personally would never attempt that from that distance with a hostage with anything less than a rifle. The chance of blowing off the hostage's head seemed too great. This made me wonder about her impulse control and risk-taking mindset. Who was this woman? The white mutant creature continued to hold the boy's hand for a second, standing on its legs with its partially severed, half-destroyed head still pumping blood into the air. Then it slowly collapsed to the floor. The dark beast in the corner seemed enraged now. It let out a demonic shriek, sending out powerful sound waves, rising and falling in distinct pulses. It sounded like a much deeper, choked version of a steam whistle. Instinctively, I wanted to drop my gun and cover my ears to stop the agonizing screech. It seemed even louder than the gunshots, something I thought impossible before hearing it. And worse of all, the beast was standing up. Though it looked fat and sluggish, and though I knew it was full of eggs because I had seen it lay them, it turned out to be much faster than it appeared. It had a gigantic, blood-red belly, but moved with the grace and speed of a cat. It stood up on its 6 legs, its upper body rising from the lower insectoid carapace like some monstrous centaur. Its segmented legs glided forward in a centipede-like motion that instinctively disgusted me, but it wasn't running towards us. It was moving away from the gunfire towards the large entrance. As it went, it grabbed the boy with its long, inhumanly slender arm. I feared it would open its massive mouth and stuff him inside, and that would be the last we saw of him. But no, it disappeared, emitting that steam whistle-like shriek as it went. My ears were ringing violently from all the gunfire, the echoes of the guns, and the beast's cries, to the point where I feared I had gone deaf for a moment. Ace stood in front of me, his lips moving, but I couldn't tell what he was saying. "What?" I yelled. My hearing slowly returned. "We have to go after the boy," he said. "Can't lose track of him." I knew he was right. The existence of a live hostage had completely changed the situation. We had no reinforcements and no way to call for help. We would have to save him ourselves. It seemed like a crazy proposition, and the creatures here outnumbered us greatly. But letting the hostage die was not an option. "Yes, of course," I said sadly. I sighed deeply. "We have more ammo in the snowmobiles." I had stuffed my pockets with slug rounds, but I hadn't expected this. Ace was probably in a similar situation. We faced the choice of turning back and trying to get as much ammo as possible, potentially losing the hostage, or pushing forward and risking running out of ammunition. It was a risk either way, as we didn't know how many creatures lived in the tunnels. I saw similar thoughts racing through Ace's head as he looked back towards the snowmobiles, then towards the tunnel. "Let's go," I said, gesturing forward. "Can't risk losing sight of him. We'll leave breadcrumbs as we go." "Metaphorically," Ace responded. "Cut off small pieces of our jackets or something so we can find our way back." "Based on the number of bastards I saw," he replied, "I think we just need to follow the empty shell casings." Jensen had started running forward by now, and we had to sprint to keep up. We ran past the eggs, some empty and others vibrating with life inside. I saw the nearest one pulsing with blood-red veins, the thin, glowing skin revealing the shadow of a grotesque insectoid creature within. It writhed and twisted, 6 legs thrashing and pushing against the membrane holding it in the egg. Occasionally, I knew it would push through. How many others had hatched? How long had this been going on? I had a feeling we would find out soon. We sprinted into the tunnel, turning on our LED headlights as we went. Jensen led, then Ace, then me at the rear. Periodically, I checked behind us, but nothing seemed to be following. Not yet. All the commotion was ahead. The creature was still screaming, though the sound was now muffled and much further away. The terrifying thing was that I heard dozens of responses from all over, deeper in different tunnels branching off from the main chamber or from this very tunnel. Some sounded very distant and barely audible, but others were closer, much closer. I also heard cries for help from the boy, though these were also fading. We tried to run faster, but what could 2 human legs do against the monster's 6 rapidly moving legs? Not much, I thought to myself. The tunnel looked empty. That strange mold grew everywhere here. We barely needed our LEDs to see, though there were so many twists and branches that it was hard to see far. Every 100 feet or so, another wall appeared, always curving left or right. As I ran, I caught glimpses of what looked like red eyes from some of the smaller tunnels. But each time I turned to look, they had vanished. The same with those who might have been following us. I thought I caught a glimpse of a long white hand or a lipless face for a moment. But when I aimed my gun, the thing had vanished into the darkness or deeper into one of the countless branching tunnels, disappearing around the corner instantly. The beast's screaming had faded into the distance, and an eerie silence settled like a fog. We had all stopped by now at a crossroads of the cave system. One tunnel turned left at a right angle, another turned right at a right angle, and then we had the larger main tunnel extending forward and behind us. Fortunately, we hadn't strayed from the main tunnel, so finding our way back would be relatively easy. It was also significantly hotter here. We had gone deeper into the mountain range, running north parallel to the Arctic Ocean. I had unzipped all my coats and taken off my hat, but I still felt like I was boiling. I could tell the other 2 felt the same. Sweat streamed down their faces, and they were tearing off layers of clothing. They threw a few jackets to the ground, not wanting to carry them for who knew how much longer. If we got out of here, I thought they might regret it. But after many miles of walking, I also threw a few jackets to the ground and left them behind. Anyway, when we came back this way to our snowmobiles, we could pick them up. Except, of course, we never went back that way. Damn it, Ace said. Well, we lost the kid. Let's go back and report it. We'll find a signal with the satellite phone somewhere in the area. I wish we had done that, but just then, circumstances beyond our control sealed our fate. It started with a small, almost imperceptible vibration. I looked around at the glowing purple walls and the strange molds covering everything. Some lost connection with the walls as the tremors grew stronger. The moment the root systems stopped touching the rock and soil, the round clusters of mold that detached would immediately turn pitch black. Their black light switched off like a switch when they were no longer anchored to the rock tunnel. Earthquake, I yelled, but Jensen and Ace clearly already knew. We looked around for a safe place. We dashed into a smaller, covered tunnel where the ground was more stable. Behind us, rocks crashed to the ground, dislodged from their position. After who knew how many years, it became a continuous series of sounds. We ran faster, and eventually something behind us seemed to give way. The entire main tunnel sounded like it was collapsing. A few small pebbles and rocks hit my face and chest as I ran. But it became increasingly clear that some fault line had slipped further behind us, running beneath the main north tunnel. It sounded like tons of rock and earth had collapsed, and then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. A few small aftershocks gently shook the area, but overall, it seemed we were safe. We all turned on our LED headlights as we returned to the main tunnel, hoping for an exit. We needed to get to our snowmobiles, and more importantly, we needed help. There could be many people held captive or taken hostage here, for all I knew. Is everyone okay? I said. Fine, Jensen said, wiping dust from her face. A small drop of blood trickled down her forehead. Oh God, the main tunnel, Ace said, slowly stepping out of the small tunnel we had taken shelter in. Look. I came out after him, not surprised to see tons of rock piled up towards us, with smaller rocks and gravel closest and large, man-sized chunks further back. We'll need to find another way back, I said. We can't go back, Jensen said. There's a hostage here. And how do you propose we find him? Ace asked. These tunnels could stretch for hundreds of miles in every direction, for all we know. I felt another vibration under my feet as a small aftershock passed through the area, causing a few small rocks to roll and tumble around us. But we've come this far, I said. We'll get the kid back. We've come this far and the way back is blocked. We'll need to find another exit. There has to be another entrance to this cave system. But what I was really thinking about were the horror stories I had heard about the catacombs of Paris, how people occasionally got lost in them. The countless random twists and turns through the darkness beneath the city, combined with miles of tunnels, meant very few who got lost down there on their own ever made it out. They usually starved or died of thirst, their bones undoubtedly mingling with the hundreds of thousands of others resting eternally beneath the bustling city landscape above. After a short rest, we began moving forward together. Spirits were low, and even Ace was somber and reflective. We continued down the main tunnel, hoping the boy was still alive somewhere in these endless tunnels. But we hadn't heard a sound from the creatures for so long that I started to give up hope. The tunnel ahead began to widen, and gigantic bioluminescent mold clusters began to invade the floor and walls, growing in shapes resembling anthills, reaching almost to my neck. A faint sound began to echo back, sounding like the gentle gurgling of an underground stream. Running forward, I shone my light on the stream and was relieved to see it was full of pure, clean water. I began greedily scooping handfuls of water into my mouth. I saw Ace and Jensen follow suit. After all the running and fighting, I felt hungry, thirsty, and exhausted. Looking up, I saw a crude bridge spanning the stream made from a slab of granite. And further on, I saw something that took my breath away. There was a large cathedral here, or at least something close to it. Hundreds of eggs stretched out on either side of the room like pews in a church. They were arranged in rows with a 10-foot wide aisle leading deeper. Hundreds of feet above, sharp stalactites hung from the ceiling, glowing in the purple light of the mold climbing the walls in thin strands. At the far end of the open chamber, several hundred feet away, I saw a carving reaching up to the ceiling. Carved from solid rock, it depicted one of the egg-laying insectoid monsters. It showed the monster standing upright with slender, branched arms reaching up to the ceiling above, its oval eyes wide open and its massive mouth agape, revealing countless predator fangs. Below, I saw one of the white humanoid creatures. This one wore crude brown robes, the first of its kind I had seen wearing clothing. It stood so still I thought it was part of the carving at first, that they had created a religious symbol showing these creatures serving their great and terrible master. But then it turned towards us. We all raised our guns. "Hold still," Jensen hissed. I saw her finger tighten around the trigger. "Don't," I said. "It's not armed. Wait." I felt eyes from all around, but when I turned to check behind, I saw nothing. We began to walk towards the robed mutant creature. As we approached the front, I saw more and more empty-looking eggs. The ones in the back all had life inside. Life pushing against the thin membrane and legs strangely sliding in the amniotic fluid they breathed. "Why should we let it live?" Jensen protested, whispering angrily as we advanced in unison. "These bastards killed that family, and who knows how many others." As I thought back to all the unsolved disappearances in this district, I knew her point. The same thought had occurred to me. How many people had these creatures killed? The mutant creature in the brown robe stood there, its lipless mouth forming a chilling smile as it looked me up and down. Its strange eyes seemed to bulge from its gaunt face. As I got close enough, I realized they seemed almost albino, with blood-red irises fading to pink near the center, the pupils seeming to glow, reflecting the strange light of the mold. I didn't know what to do next. However, the creature in front of me spoke first. "They are our gods," he said hoarsely. From the depth of his voice and his body language, I guessed this was probably a male of his species. The way he spoke reminded me of how deaf people sometimes speak, words sounding strange with random pauses and shifts in rhythm that sometimes made them hard to understand. But it was definitely English. "Who are you?" I asked. "What is this place?" He shook his head, pointing to the gigantic carving behind him. "The gods," he said. "We feed and they protect. They haven't been doing a very good job of that," Ace whispered into my ear. "Those giant bugs just ran screaming when we started shooting." I ignored this. "What are you?" I asked, hoping for a real answer. This time I got one. "We are the keepers," he said slowly, thoughtfully, looking up at the gigantic carving. "And this is the Necroce, the eater of the dead." He shook his head again, an expression that was remarkably human crossing his face. Was it regret, fear? "And they are hungry, very hungry." As if on cue, I heard the scuttling of many legs behind us. Turning quickly, I saw that while we were distracted, some of what he called Necroce had surrounded us in a semicircle, blocking any retreat. These looked much smaller than the first one we saw, and I assumed they might be juveniles. "Behind you," I yelled to my team, but they had already heard what I heard. I raised my shotgun and fired a slug into the nearest one's red, curved face. It went between its eyes, and for a moment I could see a clear hole through to the rock wall behind. Then it crumpled, its legs trembling and twitching in its death throes. Its hands moved back and forth in rapid little arcs as if it were having a seizure in its final moments. Dozens appeared, and the speed at which they charged towards us was eerie. All I saw was a red blur and flashes of many segmented legs, and an instant later, I saw one of the monsters flying through the air with its jaws open and claws extended forward. Guns fired rapidly, taking down a dozen in seconds and slowing the ones behind enough to give us a chance. But they scuttled too fast, like giant spiders. Their many legs shuffled and crunched on the rock floor, and they leaped at us. I dodged one, stepping aside and shooting it in the head with a shotgun blast. Its dark red eyes looked at me from its angular face as a huge wound erupted from behind its mouth. Screaming, it fell. Ace wasn't so lucky. One leaped at him, slashing with sharp claws and widening its jaws. In a flash, I saw it grab his left arm, cutting through fabric and flesh with ease. A spray of blood shot into the air. "Ace!" I yelled, reloading and firing. I hit the beast in the middle of its body. It gurgled and spat as blood poured from its body. It tried to stand up and continue fighting, but its legs wouldn't obey, and I watched it for a moment as it lay on the floor kicking and dying. Ace had reloaded and turned to bring down another with a direct hit. Jensen brought down the last two, and then suddenly everything was silent again. Only the ringing in my ears from all the gunfire broke it. I ran to Ace, looking at his arm. He winced, pulling up his sleeve. I saw a deep gash, the cut almost to the bone, blood spurting in time with his heartbeat, but it didn't look like any arteries were severed. We quickly applied pressure and bandaged it tightly, and after many minutes of rest and wound care, the bleeding slowed. We sat among all the dead Necroce. The strange priest had vanished during the fight, walking into a tunnel behind the carving. "We need to find food and water," I said. "Maybe there are more underground streams if we're lucky. But food, what will we do?" "Cook a necrovore." I looked at the nearest corpse with disdain as I said it. "If we have to," Jensen said. "I'm not dying here unless I have to." "Funny," Ace said, looking at his injured arm, "because you were the one so eager to come down here in the first place. Even before seeing the boy, who, by the way, we haven't seen any sign of. This whole thing is just a wild goose chase, a crazy goose chase to God knows where." "Maybe to death or the seventh circle of hell, perhaps," I joked, but no one laughed. We continued walking. Eventually, we heard a faint gurgling and found a small stream flowing through a side tunnel. We washed Ace's wound as best we could and drank as much of the clean water as possible. But hunger was starting to affect me. I wondered if we would actually have to try and eat those strange red beasts if it came to it. Maybe they tasted like lobster, I thought with a grim smile. But our problems only worsened from there. Ace's wound looked terrible. Inflamed red patches of skin erupted around the cut, and the veins seemed to discolor as they radiated out from the injury. "Nothing to worry about," Ace said, smiling. "Just a superficial wound." But I was worried, and it got worse as we continued. After a few more hours of walking, it began to truly stink, and I saw pus and black spots starting to spread on his arm. I had never seen an infection set in and spread so rapidly. I wondered what strange, alien bacteria could be on those creatures and shuddered. We rested, finding an empty side tunnel and lying down. Ace and I were at the Sensen, who had wandered down the tunnel a few hundred feet, probably to relieve herself privately. "I don't trust her," Ace whispered. "Me neither," I said. "I think she knows more than she's letting on. This whole thing seems off." Ace said, looking down at his arm for the 100th time, frowning and grimacing. "But I think you can see you need her. I'm certainly not in any condition to help you much." After resting for a while, we stood up and began to move on down the tunnel. The endless mold formations still gave us enough light to see ahead without our LED headlights. I tried to conserve battery as much as possible. Ace quickly became so ill that he stumbled, hunched over, and vomited occasionally. Sweat poured down his forehead, and he swayed as he stood upright. I looked at his wound and gasped. I thought of the medical terms I had heard. Suppuration, purulent wound, discharge from necrotic tissue, and leakage everywhere. Necrosis, living flesh being eaten away while one watches. None of these words encapsulated the true horror of what we were seeing. Ace walked for as long as he could, but as we continued, I could smell the wound more and more. Soon, it became all I could smell. It was nauseating, like rotten raw meat on a humid summer day combined with the strange, foul smell of bacteria. It drove me mad, made me want to vomit. I couldn't imagine what Ace felt during those final dark hours. I had once watched a movie called *Requiem for a Dream*, where the heroin addict's arm became infected. Black and purple streaks spread across his skin, leading to his heart, the central point of the rotting infection spreading throughout his body as he watched it consume him alive. I had never seen anything like it, at least not until now. Looking at the wound on his arm, the red, inflamed veins bulged. The skin was black and rotten in the center, the flesh separating and falling away. It ripped through the limits of my sanity. I had to look away, but when I closed my eyes, I still saw it, and I always smelled it. "I'm dying," he said. "We'll find help for you," I said, not believing it myself. He shook his head. "I can't do this anymore. I can't stand the smell of my own body rotting. I can feel my skin separating. I can feel the pus oozing out. I can feel my body rotting from the inside. I can see it." He began to cry. "Just go, leave me the shotgun and one shell. I'm not going any further. I can't take it anymore." "No, no," I began to say, but Jensen interrupted. "He's right," she said. "He's dying, even if we had medical attention. At this point, I don't know if they could save him. Sepsis has spread, and the limb needs to be amputated. but we don't have antibiotics, not even a single penicillin pill. He needs intravenous antibiotics immediately to have a chance at life. Leave the gun with me, he said. I did. I dropped the shotgun beside him, carefully placing a lead slug next to it. He lay down, his face pale and sweating, eyes wide and terrified. Now go, you guys shouldn't have to see this. You don't have to do this, I said, a weak last attempt to change his mind. He shook his head. I'm not afraid of death, old friend. I'm not afraid of suicide. I know some Jesus freaks say it ruins the eternal soul or something, but I think we both know an infinite God, if he exists, probably doesn't care. Everyone owes a death and we'll all get there somehow. But at least I took down a lot of those damn Necroce in the end. Maybe that'll be enough to get me into Valhalla. What do you think? I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Blinking quickly, I brushed the tear away. I think you'll have a front row seat in Valhalla, Ace. Save me a spot. Be safe, I said, knowing he couldn't do any such thing. Turning away sadly, we walked, and as Jensen and I went down the tunnel, I heard a shotgun blast echo from behind. He's gone, I said slowly and sadly. The sound of the gunshot still rang in my head. Jensen shook her head as if to dismiss it. We need to get out of here, she said, or we'll follow him. We have no food, no guaranteed water, no medical treatment. We'll probably starve to death, but if something happens, we could die much faster. I sighed. My stomach was cramping and tight. I was so hungry it hurt. A dull ache rose in my abdominal area, a constant reminder that I hadn't eaten a meal in far too long. Starvation. I knew it could take at least a few weeks, especially if one had some fat and muscle before starting. However, with us walking dozens of miles underground in these caves, the optimistic prediction of a few weeks until starvation narrowed significantly. Also bad, and perhaps worse, I was running low on ammunition. I fumbled in my pockets for more shotgun slugs. I counted 17 rounds left. I would keep one for myself in case of some terrible slow death and needing a way out. This meant that when we were inevitably attacked, I only had 16 shots to fire. These problems cycled through my head over and over as we walked. Jensen was less talkative. Her breathing sounded heavy, and her posture looked much more hunched than the eager, straight-backed woman I had first met. To me, it seemed she was giving up hope. I tried to encourage her. There must be dozens of exits in this place, I said. Think about it. Those white humanoid mutants, the keepers, they're feeding those giant red beasts they call Necroce, right? At least they feed them sometimes. I have a feeling the Necroce could easily hunt for themselves. They're clearly apex predators. Maybe the keepers just want to keep them a secret. Get to the point, Jensen said. What about the exits? We've seen exactly one exit and entrance to this damn place. Okay, I said. The keepers must be bringing meat in from multiple openings. It doesn't make sense for them to only have one opening, the one we came in and walked hundreds of miles underground. They're probably also trying to feed the Necroce in this stretch of tunnel, so they must be going up and out to hunt or steal food or whatever to bring back. So you're saying if we can find one and follow it, then maybe? Jensen began, but her words were cut short by a hiss from behind. I turned, raised my loaded gun, and took off the safety. The sleek black Benelli shotgun felt like an extension of my body now. Until it ran out of ammo, then it would become an expensive metal stick. Jensen reacted as quickly as I did, turning on her lead to give us more light. The white light burst out, momentarily blinding me. Compared to the dim purple light of the mold growing on the tunnel walls, it looked like the sun itself. A gigantic red blur vanished down the corridor behind us. Its strange cries, reminiscent of a steam whistle, receded with it. I looked around for more signs that we were being watched and stalked, but behind us looked empty. We continued to move forward, and the main tunnel ended, splitting into left and right corridors. Both were the same size, and there was no indication which way to go. By now, I had given up all hope of seeing the kidnapped boy again. I wasn't even sure I would survive. We turned left, and further on, the tunnel split again. We turned left again, and finally, I smelled something new. Barbecue. My stomach immediately began to churn and ache as the aroma wafted through the tunnel. I smell food, I said softly, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. Food, meat. Oh, thank God. We walked forward side by side, moving faster now. Even Jensen's eyes lit up. I'm so hungry I could eat a necrovore, she said. I bet they taste like chicken. They look more like lobster, I said. Beautiful and red with a thick shell. I bet if you boiled them alive and had some melted butter. Suddenly, I saw the tunnel was blocked by a necrovore. I instinctively jumped and raised my gun, almost firing straight into it. Then I saw it had a bullet wound through the middle of its chest. It looked dead, lying on its back with dark red eyes staring up at the ceiling. Its branched insect legs curled up pathetically like dried-up house spiders. "What the hell?" Jensen asked, her face contorted in confusion. "Who shot this one? You," I shrugged. "Must have been one of us," I said. "Maybe the last time they attacked us, one of us shot it in the belly and it ran off. Then, when it got here, it died of blood loss or organ failure or whatever finally killed it. That would be my guess." Jensen was kneeling by the necrovore corpse, moving one of its stiff legs aside to get closer to its mouth, which was full of hundreds of sharp teeth. I saw her fumbling for something in her pocket. "I need to use the restroom," I lied, now truly curious about what kind of scheme Jensen was up to. I had a feeling from the first time I met her that there was something more to her being here than just a state trooper wanting to accompany park rangers. I walked down the tunnel, and as it began to curve, I pretended to move to the wall and started to urinate. But I was watching Jensen. From her inner jacket pocket, she pulled out a clear glass vial with a black cap, then knelt before the necrovore. I saw her dip the vial into its mouth, presumably to collect some of the bloody saliva, then screw the cap back on. I started to walk back, and she quickly put the vial back in her inner jacket pocket. Jensen quickly backed away a few steps from the necrovore, her face changing back to the pale, detached expression she had worn for the past few days. But Jensen was down there. I had seen her, and she was doing something. I debated bringing up what I had seen, confronting her directly, but I decided against it. I would confront her when the time was right, but for now, survival seemed more important. We left the necrovore behind and started walking down the tunnel towards the delicious aroma of roasted meat, which was much stronger now. Ahead, I saw a flash of light shining into the cave. My heart leaped with joy. It was real sunlight, and that could only mean one thing: an exit. I was about to run forward when I heard Jensen take her gun off safety, cock it, and say 2 words to me. "Don't move." She was only a few feet behind me. I still had my shotgun slung over my shoulder, and I was looking forward, away from her. She had all the advantage. I knew it was highly likely I was going to die, and I was going to die right here on the cave floor, my family never knowing what happened. "Take off your shotgun and drop it to the floor, slowly," Jensen said. "If you turn around, I'll shoot you." I did as she asked, continuing to look away. "I've seen your expression now when you first saw the Necroce at the cave entrance, and you didn't even look surprised at all. So I'm going to ask you one question, and only one. Have you seen them before?" "Yes," I said softly, remembering. About half a year before the events with Ace and Jensen in the cave, I was alone on a wood-cutting shift. I brewed a full pot of coffee, cleaned and oiled my gun, and decided to go shooting. After pouring a gigantic pot of boiling coffee, I grabbed my Winchester .3030, a beautiful gun with a polished walnut stock. I went outside and set up targets to shoot. I had gone to the dump, gotten an old air conditioner and a metal trash can lid. And I set them up at various distances. Since it was summer, the air smelled fresh and clean. Night had fallen, and there was no pollution and no clouds. All the stars in the sky seemed to radiate a bright, pure light. A flash of what looked like blue fire shot from the gun for a second as I fired in the dark. I immediately heard the clang of metal as it connected with one of my targets. I had continued like this for a while when cries and screams began from the nearby forest. No one lived near me, so I was immediately on high alert. For a few seconds, I tried to convince myself it was just a fox or a bobcat, but I had heard both, and it sounded different. This sounded much larger and almost synthesized. I reloaded my gun, stuffed a spare magazine into my pocket, and began to follow the sound. Then I heard 1 gunshot, then 2, and louder screaming. I sprinted forward, dodging roots and rocks, moving through the thick evergreens and birch trees that grew in this part of the forest. The insects were almost silent after the gunfire, and the wilderness had an eerie quality of silence now. As if everything in these woods was holding silent so they could hear what happened next. And then I caught a glimpse of them. 2 men and an 8-foot-tall red insectoid beast. The men looked panicked and certainly didn't have marksmanship skills. They had emptied their magazines, from the looks of it, but I only saw a few small bloodstains on the insect creature. Specifically, from shallow gouges running across its side chest and on one shoulder. It advanced in a rage and used its razor-sharp finger claws to cut the nearest man's throat. Then it turned to the next man. I was running as fast as I could, trying to get in range to save the man's life. In horror, I watched the beast jerk its head forward, its mouth wide open as its jaws split apart and bit off the living man's leg at the knee. I yelled no and stopped running, looking through my scope and firing. I hit the red creature several times in the head, right between its dark, staring eyes, and after a few seconds of screaming, it fell backward. I ran forward to the injured man and shook him. "What was that?" I yelled at him. "Who are you? What are you doing?" He shook his head slowly as if trying to clear it, then looked up at me. "My name is Konstantin," he said, his voice thick. "I'm an agent of the FSB, an agent for my country of Russia. Normally I wouldn't tell you this, but I'm dying. That creature," he pointed to the giant red thing lying dead on the ground, "has a type of bacteria in its body that has tremendous potential as a biowarfare agent. It can cause septic shock in any human, and most antibiotics are ineffective. A 1/1,000,000th of a drop of that creature could kill a person, and when an autopsy is performed, it would look like an uncontrolled bacterial infection, something anyone could catch." "Thanks," I said, shooting him in the head. Then I buried the 2 Russian agents and the red creature in a single mass grave. The soft Alaskan earth covered them quickly. No one would have access to any bioweapon from these creatures while I was alive, not if I could help it. I told all this to Jensen, if that was her real name, trying to buy as much time as possible. My only hope was for some deus ex machina, some lucky savior who could stop her. Because in my heart, I knew she wouldn't let me live. No more than the FSB Russian agents would have let me live if they had succeeded in killing the necrovore and knew I had seen. Jensen's face went pale, her expression twisting into a deep frown, and then she nodded. "So the Russians somehow heard about the Necroce," she said to herself, "and now they want samples just like us." "Who are you really?" I asked. "I know you're not police." "I'm CIA," she said, smiling broadly. "I really feel bad about this, but orders are orders. I was told explicitly that no witnesses survive. The CIA wants to capture some Necroce alive and see if they can't be used as biological weapons, for example, to unleash on a hostile nation. But for now, even just the superpotent bacteria is enough. Goodbye, and I'm sorry." I closed my eyes, breathing rapidly. My time was up. I knew I was going to die now, shot in the back like a common criminal. But no gunshot came. Instead, I heard a cry of pained surprise, and then a horrible spitting, gurgling sound began. I slowly turned my head, wondering if this was some kind of trick. And then I saw Jensen standing there with her throat cut, a stream of blood gushing down the front of her clothes. Her eyes looked surprised and amazed, as if she had just witnessed the world's greatest magic trick. And then she fell, her body crashing to the rock floor of the tunnel. Behind her, I saw Ace, a bloody folding knife held tightly in a trembling hand. His other hand looked black and dead, his fingers strangely contorted. "Oh my God, Ace," I yelled in shock and happiness. "I thought you were dead." "Almost," he said, collapsing onto Jensen. I ran to him. The smell of rotten flesh from his arm enveloped the entire area, but I was too happy to be able to hug him. "How?" I asked Ace. He looked up at me, his eyes watery and unfocused, and then he vomited a thin stream of blood. It fell on Jensen's hand. "I was attacked," Ace said. "That single slug round. I had to use it to shoot a necrovore trying to ambush me right after you guys left. And then someone started cooking and I smelled meat. I just followed the smell and found one of the white mutant creatures roasting a deer over a fire. They had a food cache in a room, mushrooms, ferns, meat, and seeds, and it was huge. I hid behind a pile of deer hides, eating as much as I could, waiting to die, sipping some water dripping from the ceiling. And then I heard you and Jensen nearby. Your voices echoed. You scared away the white mutant creature. The keeper, the one cooking, I heard Jensen's confession, and I killed her." He pointed to his arm. The black and purple rot had spread over his shoulder and was starting to eat into his chest. "I'm almost done. Almost done. Will you give me peace? Will you deliver the coup de grace?" I nodded, loading a slug into the chamber. Ace looked up at me, his eyes tear-filled, his face reflecting his deep sadness and uncertainty. "I'll tell everyone about your bravery, old friend," I said, aiming the gun at his chest and pulling the trigger. There was a spray of blood and gore, and then I was alone. I took all the ammo and guns from Jensen, giving me 19 rounds for the Ruger, and then I started walking towards the sunlight. I could still see it shining through the corridor, praying for an exit. I turned into a room and saw what Ace had seen. A deer roasting over a dying fire, a pile of edible mushrooms on deer hides in the corner, a pile of ferns next to it, and various edible forest herbs on the other side. Some dried meat, like jerky, also lay on a large flat rock under the sun. I saw with horrified disappointment that the light came from a small hole in the ceiling where smoke from the fire could escape. There was no way to climb up there, unless I could turn into a spider, and the hole seemed too small to squeeze through, but it still gave me hope. It meant I wasn't thousands of feet underground, and a real exit could be just around the corner if only there weren't so many branching caves to get lost in. I think I ate my fill, then took a deer hide and started to pack as much food as I could carry. It was certainly the best meal of my life. After starving in the dark for so long, even the blandest food tasted like ambrosia. I tied the deer hide to a long stick like a hobo going to the train tracks, balancing it on my shoulder, walking alone. I wandered for weeks, eating as little as possible from the food. I found another kitchen where keepers stored food in the second week, with moose meat and more bitter mushrooms stored there, and took what I could. Cold mountain streams flowed through the caves periodically, giving me drinking water. However, I didn't find an exit, and although I caught glimpses of white hands or red carapaces behind me, the enemy seemed content to just observe and watch me until I was near the end. Then it came suddenly, a gigantic archway ahead through a bend in the cave. Because it was nighttime, I didn't even realize at first what I was seeing. But the moonlight looked so different from the dim purple glow of the mold that I recognized with joy that I must be near the end of this eternal cave. I started to run, and that's when the ambush was sprung. They came from everywhere. Keepers in crude brown robes and flashes of red from Necroce surrounded me. The Necroce spat and hissed while the keepers jabbered in their strange, high-pitched language. I dropped my remaining food to the ground, watching it spill onto the floor in slow motion as my adrenaline surged. Then, in a flash, I had the Ruger .454 in my hand. I ran towards the door, emptying all 6 rounds into the Necroce closest to me. I aimed for their dark red eyes, a technique that had worked well in previous battles. I tried to block the tunnel with the bodies of the nearest ones, but the smaller ones behind writhed and squeezed past the bleeding, twisted bodies of their siblings. However, I was almost at the exit. I could feel the fresh air now. I felt hands grab me from behind. Grabbing the Ruger, I began to strike with the butt of the gun at anything and everything nearby, finally feeling the hands let go after a few seconds. One of them grabbed the pistol, and it fell to the floor. I didn't have time to pick it up. Now I had Necroce on either side, and they moved in a red blur, legs sliding forward as their bodies twisted from side to side. In hungry anticipation, their mouths gaped open, and their claws began to lash in the air. As I grabbed the shotgun and fired, the first one's hand was blown off. It screamed, looking down as blood pumped from its wrist, then began to recoil, colliding with the necrovore behind it, making it fall. The second one leaped straight at me, its massive mouth wide open. I could look down its slick, wet throat. It aimed for my face, and I started firing blindly, hitting its open mouth 3 or 4 times. It fell to the floor a few inches from me, and I heard a click as the shotgun ran out of ammunition. As I ran, I loaded the last round into the shotgun, fired behind me, and hit a few of the things trying to kill me. I fumbled in my pockets and realized I now only had 2 rounds left. I sprinted through the exit, clutching the last rounds. I saw the creatures pass through the stone doorway, and after putting a slug into the chamber, brought down a large necrovore at the threshold. It fell silently, blocking the doorway for the ones behind, and I ran. I ran for what felt like hours until I saw a small wisp of smoke ahead. I found a small Eskimo village on the coast. An elderly woman in a small hut opened the door. Someone in town had a ham radio. They used it to call for help and get me evacuated. When I first returned and looked at myself in the mirror, I was horrified. I had lost a lot of weight and looked emaciated, my cheekbones sharp and angular. My haunted eyes were sunken deep in my bony face. I could count every rib on my chest, and my legs looked like protruding sticks. I didn't tell my boss the full story or anyone else. I had been missing for weeks and mainly said I got lost in the tunnels while searching for a missing boy. This was true to a certain extent. However, I didn't tell them about the Necroce or the heroic actions of Ace, who had saved my life. That was a story I kept to myself until now. And that is the entirety of the letter from the park ranger in Alaska. Listeners, I have contacted several sources in Alaska. They confirmed many mysterious disappearances in the area he described. They also confirmed the death of an entire family at Lena Peak Trailer Park in 2018. As for the Necroce and the Keepers, I don't know what to think. Perhaps they are still out there, lurking in the deep caves beneath the Alaskan mountains. Perhaps they are still hunting. And maybe, just maybe, this story is a warning to all of us that there are things in this world we should not seek. Secrets that should remain buried forever. Ace Acosta, if that was his real name, sacrificed his life to save his friend. In the darkness of those tunnels, he demonstrated what truly makes a human being. Not perfection, but courage in the face of ultimate fear. I am Morgan H., and this is Late Night Radio Stories. Hold your loved ones close. Cherish the light, and if you ever find yourself in Alaska, stay away from the mountain caves. Good night if you can sleep.